Than just, you gotta, you know, just go get your signatures.
Next
Or
well, through a lot of various ways.
the rest is
We
just,
have always had some overhang on
the
that,
rest is, you know,
and it would require some overhang, but you have
it's more like 132.
very the end, it's a pretty small building. But
So that's, at the end of the day, we can talk climate all day long, but it's just simply a matter of, you will put it on, you know, or you're gonna have, you know, please go out and get signatures. That's the only difference.
All right.
see, there's a rib of 9 inches
How are you feeling?
because it's 3 foot. You have to take a lot of things into account. Yeah, the things that are 3 feet wide plus an inch and a half for the overlap. So by varying the, put the roof boards on, let them stick out, and then you put your,
So do you see online?
2-4 underneath the boards.
We got Stacy, Sarah Stewart, Taylor.
Build and go in the front.
Yep.
You build this corner square instead of having this vertical thing here.
Nancy
Build this square.
Kaczynski,
And then anyways, you have to bury that.
Helen
You've got
Esmond.
4.5 inches
and Dana Jacobson.
to work with. Depending on how it comes out, but you can, especially on a big building, 4.5 inches is a big deal, right? When you've got some overhang on it, some overhang like this on the end.
Oh, nice. And what supports that overhang?
Just the boards.
Just the boards.
Yeah. But we tried various things. We even tried bending it. You can't bend it. We did. But the problem is, when you bend it really tight, it cracks.
And that's what essentially the exact knife was.
Her hair?
I've had, you know, many small cuts on the exact knife and then
That's how you cut the metal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like hand cuts, and then it, you know, that opened up the cut a little bit more, a number of other cuts, and first piece I struggled with, the second time I cut it to the front.
They're almost ready. Ernest is here. How you guys doing?
We're good. Do any of these people need to be panelists?
Nancy Kaczynski should be a panelist. So when that agenda item comes up, Mary, you may want to just make that clear that, you know, talk about it all day long, but you're here, it's kind of a simple decision at the end of the day.
So it's, we have to have that decision about whether it goes.
Yeah, they're, I think they're coming to you and asking the select board, hey, because they can go on as 2 different ways, they can get
I know, but I thought we already discussed this. I thought we already suggested that they get signatures because it's an educational kind of outreach method.
as a board, that hasn't occurred.
Oh, it is,
And,
okay.
you know, I don't think they've officially been told one way or the other. They're coming to you for that guidance.
Okay.
She's suggesting that they want to vote by Australian ballot.
No.
Only if we go, the only way,
Yeah.
the only actually winning can happen this year, the only way it can happen is if, again, due to COVID, and the legislature gives us another 1-year bye, then if we go on Australian ballot, they would, so whatever way we go, that article has to go.
Yeah. But the way she talked there was that they were going to do it both at the same time.
There's no choice.
But
Okay, are you ready? No, okay, you want to sign those first? Yeah, I'm just asking, I'm not pushing. We didn't start last
Well, if you ever
meeting
go
until
over to my house, I'll show you
5,
my,
6, so.
Okay.
my garage. I think that we went through 4 different farm buildings before I finally figured out how to do it. I even have a drip edge under the edge
Yeah.
to hold it up.
My neighbor, Charlie,
Yeah.
he's my voice of
Yeah.
3 shades and a cabin.
Just need one more.
So I kept ran up there a few times.
Yeah.
Any news rumors from what you see?
Am I all caught up with this image?
Oh,
Becca Warren.
yeah. That's been a good part-time job for him. He's a sociable guy. I think he could.
BECK.
That's what he said. Likes to talk, likes to drink. Yeah, well, I like their cassis. I don't know if you've had that. It's a,
Yeah, he must have been right at home with the cabinet. Do they still have the cabinet?
Did you
they still
have
sell
under
cabinet products.
notes
Yeah.
about
We still get a little discount.
going to Teams or Zoom or whatever?
30% off or something. No, but then the cabinet is out.
So,
Yes.
just want to make sure.
Comment under update, yes, I do.
Yeah, there seems to be research. I don't go there very often,
You think
but it's
some of these other
busy, and there's a lot of vendors.
finance?
I can't believe the flea markets, whenever I go out on the weekends.
Is that, would that be more?
20 years from now, someone may say, you know,
Setting up.
who the heck was this Martin Bolt? So, yeah,
I don't
Sort
know,
of thinking about what's on.
I'm not a flea market person, so I don't know the circuit, how many things kind
No big deal.
of, you buy something so you can sell it at your flea market.
I do that in the minutes I take from the district. I identify everything. It's the same reason. 20 years from now.
You see him setting up, like 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right. That's right.
5 o'clock.
Yeah.
But I still remember that
Okay.
field
ready?
of the
Okay.
hay, it's also the site of the Scottish Festival. Oh, come on.
Come
I said
on,
there
come
was
on. You look like you're enjoying your conversation, but
You ready?
Martha's ready. I'm ready. Okay, good evening, everybody. We're gonna open the meeting at 5:40 p.m. And our first item of business is the select board orders, which I'll take a motion.
There are no orders.
you just have the payroll warrant, sorry.
So what we just
The
signed?
payroll,
Yeah.
yeah, so you can,
I thought that was the same thing.
There's nothing in the packet that said order.
This,
That's different.
it wasn't done until today.
okay.
I forget the dates, but I'll make a motion to accept the warrants as in the green folder.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay.
Up till today, right?
Any discussion? Curtis? Okay. Okay, I think by consensus, we're all in favor. Any adjustments, number 2, any adjustments to the agenda?
I did want to bring up one thing.
Okay.
Of the ARPA. 2 things, actually.
Okay, where would they be fit best? What are they about?
Oh, not very short, very short. Just, I can do it right now.
Okay, well, do I have a motion to accept Gordon's, or these new adjustments to the agenda?
Sure.
Sure.
Curtis?
I didn't hear what they are.
We haven't, he's keeping them secret for the time being. We're going to approve the adjustments to the agenda without knowing what they are.
Very odd. Very odd.
It could be a Christmas secret. Okay, I think
Oh, okay.
we're in favor. Go ahead. Yes.
Okay, I just have concerns about getting all these volunteers we're gonna need for our committee. And I just think it would be, because the time moves on quite quickly, and we talked about it last time. In fact, is it Sarah that brought up the idea that we don't want to dilly-dally, we ought to get on with it. So I'm just saying that we should be thinking about who we might want to recruit if we don't get enough volunteers. Is that understandable? Okay, that's one thing. My second thought is, and this has to do with the budget, Dave. We've got the upcoming expenditure of the bond for the intersection with the possibility of an overrun. And I'm wondering if that would be covered by ARPA money, possibly. And if it was, that would affect your budget considerations. That would seem to me as just logically, because overruns on that project would be caused to quite an extent by the pandemic. And that's just an idea I'm throwing out there that maybe we could investigate.
So this is a budget discussion that can happen at the end. I'm not gonna, wouldn't put my life on that one, but, you know, we can look into it. I think we still need to prepare.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah.
We got two options, you know, this is a budget discussion for the
Yep.
end. This is under, you know, fund balance reserve, actually, so we can get into it more.
Okay, that's it.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Gordon. All right, item 3 is public comments. Any public comments? Okay, thank you. Oh, that's a good point. Anybody online? Nobody's raised their hand.
Yeah, I don't see any hands over here.
Okay, thank you. Item 4, old business, which is the fiscal year 23 budget ongoing discussion. First things, general fund and highway fund, individual departments.
Yeah, so we did kind of a macro discussion last week, which is pretty well a bulk of, I think, what you need to know, but it always helps to get into some of the details of each individual department, just so you know what is in the budget, and you know, to further ask questions or analyze, or again, be fiscally prudent to know what all the pieces are. So I'm going to go through some of the finer details of the budget tonight compared to last week. You looked at the overall macro perspective. I am going to pull this up so people online can see it. You're also going to be able to see it on the screen, hopefully, if it comes up. So just to recap real quick on the general fund. The general fund presently is showing a 5.59% increase. That's just the budgetary expenditures year over year. That is going to translate into about a 6.16% tax rate for the general fund. Again, for both the general fund and the highway fund, differential between the tax or the expenditure increase and the tax rate is simply the revenues. There are no real increase to the revenues compared to increases in the expenditures. And that's why you see the higher tax rate compared to the budget increase.
Dave, can you take a question on this section?
I can, because my computer doesn't want to go to expenses. It's taking its time here. Sure, go ahead.
I'm just looking at capital improvements.
What page are you on?
First page.
Oh, okay.
Two-thirds of the way down. Oh, you have? Oh, this front page. Got it? improvements.
Okay,
right,
yeah.
yes and no. Okay, so I'm looking at that, at the actuals for the last 3 years that, plus I don't know what this year's happening, but big numbers. And yet we're only budgeting like half, a little more than half of that.
Yep. So again, it depends on what we have for, you know, projects in any particular year. So you'll, let me get to that page. If you go back to like 2019 or, you know, I think that we get into certain things like the roof to the library. You know, and then we've cut back a little bit, particularly last year, because we had a, you know, kind of an increase that was reaching 6-7% in the general fund last year. So I cut back a little bit on the projects that we were doing. And, you know, again, to be honest with you, you can only do so many things, you know, at once. So, this past year, fiscal year 22, we budgeted for the floors at the activity center. And then we budgeted for the stairs to Damon Hall. We're working on putting the stairs together. And unfortunately, we're working on putting the floor together. At the activity center and the stairs at Damon Hall, unfortunately, we needed to put off, perhaps until spring. I suspect it will be more like July or August, when it'll be the next fiscal year, when it didn't have anything to do other than the fact that, you know, they couldn't get the workers here on time. The other number you see, which may throw you for a loop, and you're looking at larger numbers, the 23,045 for an actual expenditure in 2021 is for the Three Corners intersection project. And we get grant reimbursement, at least for, you know, whatever is reimbursable at the moment. So we get revenue back on that. But since I have been here and before, we've always run the Three Corners intersection project through the general fund and through the capital projects, or through the capital improvements. Not sure that's quite appropriate, but that's what we've been doing, so we kept it consistent so we can track those numbers through the years. So that's actually pretty deceiving. So if you take the 23 away from that 67, you get back into kind of where we've been the last 2 years, 3 years. And before that, you get into those numbers, you know, actual 2020 was 37.6, which we've got budgeted 35 this year. And the year prior to that, we knew that we were going to be doing the library roof. That's the 54. What we didn't know is that we were going to spend 11 grand on the activity center front facade. Remember, the roof was, you know, there was kind of a leak off of the front overhang of the front door. Josh Boynton, you know, we had to get, you know, essentially the clapboard was rotten, and then we had to get in, and then there was no insulation, and, you know, kind of one of those things that the more you peel back the layers, the worse it gets. So that's why you see large numbers, but, you know, that fiscal year 21, the Three Corners intersection, and also, again, tale of two different things. In fiscal year 21 that we budgeted for, we ended up budgeting 20 grand to paint the library. We ended up doing a lot of that ourselves, and we budgeted, you know, 20 grand was for the front steps to the rec center. And it kind of fell in 2 different fiscal years, but we ended up spending more like 36 grand on the rec center front steps. So, you know, just as well that we did budget that. So that's a little bit, really depends on the projects that we've got and why that is up and down. I would prefer it to be a little bit more, but, you know, again, I don't see being able to do with the other projects that we've got going on. You know, we've got the Three Corners intersection project. If that continues on target, This summer, John hopefully is going to be working on a walking path. We have got the activity center with the roof over there. That alone is enough before we even start talking about the ARPA funding. So, I think that, we can do what we can do. And, I don't think we should budget for anything more than we think we can accomplish.
Okay.
Anybody online, Jan? Is anybody raising their hands?
Okay, can you, if I recall, the total assessment increase is because of the loans as well as,
Yeah, so I'm gonna go through each one here. So I can't, my computer's so old and clunky that I can't get past the first page as long as I'm on Zoom and
is that
screen
going to be a
sharing.
line item on the next
Yeah,
page?
that
or-
sounds like a,
All that good stuff, but I'm gonna be going through this, so why don't I
That's
flip the
fine.
page and, just follow along with me. So once we get past the general page, we've got one of 12. Start with the administration section. This is down actually. And one of the primary reasons it's down is health insurance. We're down about $20,000. And that's simply because one of our employees has chosen to go another route, is not taking town health insurance. We had originally had him budgeted for a family version of that, so it's down. The rest is pretty straightforward. However, you'll see fleet and liability insurance, which is about 3/4 of the way down. That's down a little bit over last year. I should also note that our health insurance stayed about the same, or it's down a couple percentage points. One concern I've got with the general fund expenses in the administration section is computers. Stacy has mentioned that they could use a computer, at least one laptop. We're particularly talking about, especially in COVID times, but even in non-COVID times, we run into issues, whether it be just, parental, need to be home for the family. But particularly in COVID times, I could use an upgrade, obviously, with my computer running as slow as it is. Each department should probably have one at this point. We feel pretty strongly that ARPA funding can be used for the purchase of laptops. So that's certainly something that the administration, is just kind of waiting to put forth. However, we do have $3,500 in there. That's kind of what we've been running. But, when ARPA discussion comes around, we're certainly going to be looking and talking about laptop computers from the administration point of view. Next section down, again on page 1, is the assessment. If you flip over to where it says 2 of 12, again down towards the bottom, you'll see an increase for the fire department capital reserve. It's talked about this last meeting, and I showed kind of a spreadsheet on that, going from 61,000 to 65. And that's going to carry us through into the 2030s. Again, John Sanders he's going to talk a little bit about this when that comes up. As a purchase this year, and then I think it's 2027 or 28, he's looking at a second purchase. Next thing on that assessment section is the Three Corners Capital Project Fund. If everything goes according to plan, which so far it is, we will be bonding this winter. Martin has submitted the bond application for that. It would be in February. We then have our first interest payment in May or June, I can't remember, and then a second one in November. And that kind of starts us off. So that's the first of 20 payments that we'll have over the course of the next 20 years. Constable, next one down is just a slight increase, a little bit of an increase in pay and supplies. Both are in line. The constable is in line for another bump in pay. Working on getting him to a more respectable place as far as pay goes. But again, percentage-wise, that's about a $1,500 increase year over year for the constable. Listers. Listers is, again, a good amount of the increase, most all the way down the line on these, and I'll remind everybody, based upon the New England Consumer Price Index, which we base our basically cost of living adjustments for the employees. That's at 4.65 this year, biggest jump I've ever seen. So in most of these departments, whether it be the listers, the clerk, the finance, administration, you'll all see a bit of a jump there. But again, we're presently facing 6% inflation depending on the product. So listers, again, if you look at the pay line, you'll see an increase there. However, there's not much of a difference on the listers department other than that, except for they've broken out memberships and conferences, and they have taken it kind of, they want to take membership in two items. One is the International Association of Assessing Professionals, and also New England Real Estate Network. The Association of Assessing Professionals will provide an educational component for them. They can do some self-teaching, and they can also attend seminars. I think it's excellent that they've taken it to take this and be proactive in learning this. And the New England Real Estate Network should provide them with additional information on sales of properties that we may not know today or through the assessment, but is known through the information that this provides. So again, that's, between that and conferences, it's maybe about $1,000 difference between last year. But again, I'm highlighting some of the things that, show up in these departments and what's important for those that, have put the numbers together and have come to me and said, look, this is what we want money for. Town clerk's office. The big thing here is trying to budget for elections in summer of 2022, essentially the fiscal year 23. We're going to have a primary for governor of Vermont. We're also going to have the midterm elections 2022, and then we have town meeting. And I hate to say it, I would love to say, gosh, we are going to be soaking in the sun and there's going to be no pandemic. Certainly thought that last year at this time. Yet I think that we may end up at least entertaining the idea of what to do with town meeting this spring. But, again, as far as fiscal year 23, it's still part of the discussion when I speak to Brian. So he's got some numbers in there under postage and election expense that's more than, years prior, but runs in, if you look at the 2021 actual expenses, it's a little bit lower, and again, some of these expenses go towards, making up the ballot with the ballot machines. We mailed out, ballots for town meeting. So these are all expenses that we haven't occurred before. We've got, it's not as high as last year is what we've got, or 2021 last year that we've got, but certainly he's accounting for that. On the revenue side, I have got money, from ARPA to essentially cover that. Any of those extra expenses or extra steps that the state does not cover, that is to keep, people as safe as can be, to keep them away from Damon Hall in order to get them to participate. It certainly would be an ARPA reimbursable expense. So there is some money on the revenue side. In talking with Brian this afternoon, I may need to bring that revenue number down a little bit. I think I budgeted $8,000. Doesn't completely mesh with the numbers we think we might come up with for expenses, but it's pretty close. So, you know, I may make an adjustment going into the final budget numbers. I always have some adjustments, whether it be VLCT dues or Two Rivers dues or, you know, ambulance or whatever it is that comes out between the time I put this together last week and, you know, next week. Always have some slight adjustments to make. I may make an adjustment there.
Dave, on the list or town clerk, I'm sorry, I don't see any funding for any of the digitizing of the records. Is that?
So, yep, and that's, so you've jumped ahead of me here.
Okay.
So, we also feel pretty darn, so I'm gonna go through, you know, and I've only got one other thing, and that was actually, I missed it for administration. So, for ARPA, we've got computers that we feel as though we need and are ARPA reimbursable. Digitizing is certainly an ARPA reimbursable expense. Again, you are making your office usable to lawyers or to those on the outside that want to access those records without coming into David Hall. It was pretty useful with the data that we had, but I do have numbers for Brian. I think it's to go back another 20 years. He has given me, we've been just kind of holding until this ARPA discussion. But certainly, at this point, that of all the things I hear from VLCT that you should be looking at using ARPA money for, digitizing records is, you know, in blinking lights out there. So.
Can I just add that the majority of the software license line item is the service fee for digitization of our records and maintaining that online database.
So a little bit farther down, about 3/4, what Brian was talking about is that $2,510 line item, which is new to us because it is, you know, host the, you know, the records that are used. It's also a little bit of a copier expense in there, but predominantly for a yearly fee for the COTS system, which is there. It's a new number for us, so that's why you see it there. Just to let you know, Brian has indicated to me, we haven't done it on this version, certainly we'll go into the NIMRIC system, if not the next version, but Brian does want to track election postage and postage, just our regular postage that he uses on a year in and year out basis compared to the election postage. The election postage, our election expenses really vary year to year, depending on whether it's a presidential election or, you know, it's not a huge amount, but it's like a $3,000 to $4,000 swing. Brian would like to break that out, so I think it'll be a little bit more easier to follow. Brian certainly thinks so and has brought that to our attention. So also going to probably pull out the miscellaneous dog tags, make just the dog expense along with the miscellaneous expense, and the miscellaneous dog tags is kind of, it can be clumped under a dog expense. Between the dog tags and rabies vaccinations and other things that we do that end up on two different lines. So he's requested that that be grouped together as well.
So I've got a question then.
Yep.
So, Brian, do you get reimbursed by the state for the election postage, or was that just this past year they paid for envelopes?
That was just this past year, we were able to get reimbursed. There hasn't, it kind of depends on what they do legislatively with regards to COVID. If they were to pass something like they did similarly last year, it might cover expenses. But that was kind of a one-time thing thus far. But in the event that we might be able to take advantage of some reimbursement from the state, if we were to have election postage teased out, it would just make it that much easier to track it and then have a better sense of exactly what we spent versus having it lumped in. It was kind of tedious to to tease out those numbers to apply for reimbursement.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
And also, depending on the source, you know, if there is no pandemic and there is no expenses, you know, those just will be lower, and then there will be no ARPA reimbursement on the revenue side, so it's kind of a little bit like the rec center. So if we have those expenses, you'll see a reimbursement on the other side, so it's kind of, you know, it'll kind of move with one another. Finance department, really no changes there, other than the bump in salaries there with the 4.65% CPI. Ordinance administration and planning, I mentioned this last meeting. The big increase here is on some planning software or some GIS type software that allow us to use a lot of our own databases that we have today. Also allow us to create new databases and then either mostly utilize existing GIS data that is out there. This is all, if it does what I think it is going to do, it's a very reasonable way to go. It ties in with our CAI software, which is what we use in the Lister's office for our tax mapping. So again, there's a lot of crossover and a lot that we can do between the two.
So is the $27.50 a license fee, or is it a consulting fee to get started, or a mix?
Yeah, so we talked about that last meeting. So the $27.50 is the yearly fee. And on the warrants last week, you saw the setup fee for the software
The
in the
install?
program. Yeah.
Okay.
Planning Commission stays the same, as does the Conservation Commission. Just remember, anything above and beyond what the Conservation Commission spends goes to the Conservation Fund. So if they only spend $1,000, $1,000 goes to the fund. Some of these other ones are I'm going to skip over Sumner's Falls. There's not much there.
Dave,
Yep.
I highlighted that because if we're talking about doing things there, shouldn't we budget something?
It's budgeted under the buildings and grounds.
Okay.
So his fees are there, as well as, you know, a lot of the miscellaneous expenses that we have under buildings and grounds. You know, some of that's an unknown, so it's, you know, I think it's probably a little bit low at this point. But under the buildings and grounds, we haven't really been utilizing all the money that's there, so I think that there's room to, you know, again, you know, when Evan was buildings and grounds, he was doing cemeteries. It'll be done by somebody else, but the fuel and the lawn mowing maintenance, you know, the maintenance for the lawnmower and all that good stuff is still the same. So some of these expenses are there and most likely will be absorbed there, or some other line item. You know, chainsaw maintenance, the sharpenings and stuff tend to fall under, you know, the highway crew, even though, you know, it might be the buildings and grounds crew that's using it.
So I have a question.
Yep.
So this conservation transfer out, is that something that is just being started to be, not noticed, but accounted for in this section, or there's nothing under it?
I believe that, Martin can chime in, I believe that's just the line he uses when he transfers any extra money from the Conservation Commission to the Conservation Fund. Is that correct?
That's how the accountants like to see it.
So they've never transferred anything?
Every year.
Oh, okay.
But the accountants like to see it worded that way, so when they do their auditing, they can take that in their Excel spreadsheet and it brings up.
Okay, thanks.
Flushing Meadow Library, Martin Memorial Building, North Hartland School, the increases there you'll see are in basically fuel, whether that be oil or propane. Again, we've bumped those numbers by 20%, with an exception of the recreation building, where I think that it's been budgeted probably appropriately from the past. But I'm gonna kind of go through those quick because that's really the only changes there. The rec center, the rec programs, and I'm actually, I'm gonna go through some of this now. I just want to reiterate that the rec programs, you know, we spend a majority of our time talking about the highway department, and again, most of the headaches, not because of Bill, but just because of bridges such as Mill Street, or box culverts such as Mace Hill or whatever, Martinsville Road, you know, just consumes us. But our next largest budgeted program or department is the rec center. And I'm gonna go through these numbers, but when I'm through going through the numbers, I'm just gonna have John give him an opportunity to just kind of expand a little bit about what's going on at the rec center and maybe where that's going over the next year or two. I also want to reiterate that, you know, even though we spend a fair amount of time concentrated on highway, rec center during pandemic time has been a challenge, you know, so we hear all about the schools, but I want to reiterate that, you know, what we do over at the rec center, two of our biggest programs, the after school program and the summer camp, resembles a lot of what they do over at the schools. So, you know, we have not been immune to some of the challenges of children and COVID-19. So budget-wise, you know, again, salaries is, you know, between the two, again, that 4.65 jump. Another thing that, you know, kind of sticks out in the rec center, and there's not much here, but health insurance, there is a bump of $5,000. So some departments, you know, such as administration, we had an employee that didn't take insurance, so that's, you know, a benefit budget-wise to the town. In this case, we had an employee bump up, or will bump up from, you know, basically a two-person to a family, so that obviously is an effect to us, so you see that in the budget as an effect. The only other real changes here on the rec center is on some of the programs, we were really unsure last year, so we kind of budgeted as if it was going to occur, you know, like maybe for half a year. So we only budgeted, or we were kind of light on the expenses, but again, we were kind of light on the revenue. In this case, we upped the Teen Adventure program. You know, you see it go from $2,000 to $3,500 for the actual payroll. And the program expenses go from 7 to 11. Those numbers are more in line when we were running those programs full time. Again, you know, this is for next fall and winter. We're all kind of hoping that we're back to some normalcy. So we budgeted for that, but I'll reiterate, if we don't, you know, and I've got revenues on the other side of this, if we don't realize the revenues or we don't realize the expenses, they kind of go hand in hand. So if the programs aren't running, we have no expenses, but we also have no revenue, or vice versa. So I just think that that's important to remember.
Dave,
Yep.
how many people, I'm back at health insurance, how many people, $45,000?
For two people,
Two
employees.
Two families.
Yep.
Yeah.
For family plan, it runs about 23,000. John, you want to give us a little update on the rec center again? I felt as though the board should hear a little bit more about the rec center, and also to give John a good opportunity to kind of present what's going on these days at the rec center.
All right, so we are still currently hosting our after-school program. We were able to keep that intact, and we didn't have any COVID-related absences this past year. To this point, I'm actually waiting for when that does happen to us, because it's all around us right now. We've been down in numbers the last 2 weeks because there's current classes in quarantine, so we've been missing some populations the last couple of weeks. So it's inevitable that we're gonna get one of those sooner or later, it's just a matter of time. But we've managed to make it this far without it happening, so that's good. We have been able to get back to some of our youth programs, like providing swim lessons at the Aquatic Center. We've been back to the bowling alley in Claremont. This fall, we started a new horseback riding and horsemanship program with Delaney Stables. We've been bringing kids over there after school, and we've filled the roster every time we've offered that, and we're even going to offer it through the winter months. Kids seem to be willing to go into the barn through the winter, so that's been a nice addition. In addition to that, we've been in
Where is that, John?
Delaney Stables is Brownsville. Yep, it's only about 20 minutes, not too bad. In addition to that, we've been coordinating with VINS, and we're going to do some sort of after-school program with VINS starting this spring, so I'm excited for that to get in place as well. People have been, we've filled all of these programs, all of these rosters when we were able to offer them this fall, so people are definitely ready to get their kids back into programs and do things. We had great numbers for soccer again this year, so it was nice to have those things back. And sort of like what David been explaining is a lot of our programs, they have expenses that come with them. So like when we go to the Aquatic Center or the bowling alley, we then have a fee that we pay per child. So if we were in a year where we were not able to provide those programs for COVID reasons, then we don't have those expenses as well. So we weren't sure we were hoping that we were going to be back to as normal as possible, but it wasn't quite that way this past year. So we're hoping that it's more normal next year as well. We are going to be able to use the school gym as of right now for basketball, so that's nice. There was no basketball last year in Hartland. That was a challenge to put some of the guidance together there. We worked with the superintendent and the other athletic directors within our SU, as the schools are not allowing any visitors, guests, just parents and teachers in the building. So coming up with a plan to get these parent volunteer coaches in place took a little bit of time, but I'm glad we've got something in place for that. The school is not doing an early release for the winter activities this year. We didn't do it last year as well. I'd really like to see that get back in place. I think that was a huge success, and I think that was really crucial to the well-being of our students through the winter months especially. I think there might have been some busing issues or just COVID-related reasons for this year, so there are no buses running. We are doing a ski runners program, so the rec center will be providing a van transportation. The school gets out at 2:15, so we'll get there just in time for them to get about a 1-hour lesson in on the mountain. Not 110 like we had 2 years ago, but I think we're gonna have about 35 kids between van transportation and parent transportation. But at least we're able to keep that going, which is nice. Other things that we had, the concert series that Mascoma Savings Bank has been sponsoring for us seems to have been gaining speed. We've been seeing a better and better population at those concerts. I think we had as many cancellations as we did concerts this last year, but we still managed to get them in. So that was nice. We just finished passing out free winter sleds. This is the second year in a row we've done that. That was thanks to an Amplify grant from Rise VT. We passed out about 35 sleds this year. I think it was about 25 last year. That's been a nice little thing that was well received by the community. And then, as Dave was talking about with the walking path, I'd really love to get that walking path refurbished, get some new hard pack in there. I'm not sure how many people remember, but when that walking path first came in about 10 years ago, that was such a hit. We got so much praise for that publicly. It was really well received, and it's one of those things that people can go and make use of the walking path on their own time. It gets people out, gets them moving, whether it's just a lunch break or it's parents taking laps during their child's soccer or baseball practice. We also use it for little community fun runs with the cooperative nursery school and such. And we have funds, and I think we'll be able to find more funds to take care of that project as well.
John, I just have to, I'm really glad, sorry to interrupt you, I'm really glad that you had positive feedback, because the one piece of feedback I got after we said, let's do this, was so negative. This person accosted me in the library parking lot. I was like, I'm pretty sure it's a good idea. So it's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, I don't know who else remembers when we put it in place. It was a hit. People were really excited for that walking path
I
to
still
come in
see
place.
people out there.
Yeah, and people still walk
Yeah.
through there. So we've got that section by the soccer field from Mike's. When we took out those trees a few years ago, a lot of the banks slid down. So we lost that section of the path through there. So what we've included in our RFP, the request for pricing, is some drainage work as well, because we're getting a lot of runoff from those culverts underneath Route 5 coming down the bank. I talked with Matt Dow, he's come and looked at it, but basically we need to dig something out, whether it's ditch it or put something in and get some crushed stone in there, give the water a place to drop down. That will help as well. And also the other spot where the path really needs the most work is over closer to the brook. Just like the Lowell's Brook continues to change. Lowell's Brook got drastically rerouted with Irene, and it's still there's trees dropping, and it's still changing its course every spring. And then we've also been trying to make a push with our North Hartland Park. We got some tree work done this past year. We did some fencing. Now we're looking to resurface the court, the tennis court, especially over there. We've got a little pickleball group that's anxious to get some pickleball lines as well. So once we get that, gets an additional set of lines painted on that, so the pickleball people can get out there. With pickleball, you use half of the court, so then you can get 2 court spaces going on 1 court as well. So it's like a game of less movement for those that don't want to run quite as far back and forth. It's been a popular activity.
That's great. Anybody have questions?
I have a question.
Yep.
When a student wants to do the horseback riding, for example, does the rec department pay that fee, or do the students have to pay something also?
We pay Delaney Stables directly, and then we have that built into our pricing for our fee.
Okay. And the same with the swimming or the
Same with the
bowling?
swimming, right? Yeah, so they pay us, and then we pay the bowling alley, the barn, or the aquatic center. Yeah.
Okay.
Curtis, do you have any questions?
You said that.
Yes, I do have a question. So when we got the high-level overview of the budget both last week and then again today, as we mentioned, the main driver is inflation, but I think something that I'll probably ask for each of the departments is basically, given that the increase in your budget is 5.71% and your personnel expenses don't represent 100% of your budget, I'm wondering if you could give us a little high-level overview of what the remainder of the budgetary increase is due to mostly.
Sure, yep. So we try to adjust our prices for our programs as well when things like this happen. For instance, I can tell you that the aquatic center has informed me that the cost per pupil for lesson has gone up. So our expenses to provide our programs has gone up. So supplies, soccer balls, basketballs, nets, replacing goals, things along those lines have all gone up. Part-time payroll. Dave and I had a discussion about what it would take to keep us staffed at a part-time basis, and what this meant, especially for the after-school program, was a bump in the starting pay to get people in there, which I think a lot of people are facing. So I think that's probably beyond just the 2 full-time salaries, the part-time wages is a big piece as well, because we currently have about 5 people for our after-school program and youth programs part-time, and then in the summer we're up to as many as 8 part-time staff for the summer programs as well.
And is the main increase in the staffing requirements because of offering it to more participants, or is it because of requirements due to COVID stuff?
I guess I've lost me a little bit there. So we are offering more now this fall than we were last fall. We have like the swim lessons, the bowling alley, the riding. We're getting ready to go with Vince, so we have more going on, which requires more staffing. So that's part of it. But then we also needed to increase wages, especially to keep the after-school program staffed. That's the hardest piece to keep in place. With hours of essentially 2 to 5 o'clock, it really doesn't supplement too many people's schedules, so it's tricky to get those people in, to find qualified people for that as well.
Okay, thanks, John.
You're welcome. And like the one bump in the part-time wages, the after-school pay from last year, part of that is because I was able to get them an essential childcare worker stipend, so that's $5,000 of last year's after-school cost that you see with the higher number from last year's actual. In addition, we ended up providing a longer day, longer hours last year because school was started as a noon release day. So our after-school program had longer hours.
Bill, Gordon?
No, we're all set.
Any other questions?
No. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Who's up next?
The ADA work on the building is in a separate area of the budget.
I'll come to that. So that's under grant. So if you remember, we had a $5,000 local share or a local match component, which is $5,000.
Yep.
I believe it's a $50,000 grant. So we expect everything to be covered under that, you know, the 5 plus the grant being the 45. So, you know, we've only got budgeted 5. What may end up happening is if we, you know, get the project, you'll have $50,000 in expenses, you know, but you'll see $45,000 grant revenue on the other side at the end of the day.
Thank you.
Or 45,000 grant revenue and then the 5 that we had to spend. That's it for the.
No other departments?
So I'm gonna finish this up, and then that's it for individual departments,
Okay,
correct?
okay.
So I think I got my screen to work while John was speaking. I got it kind of unstuck. So Curtis, you are now able to see what everybody else is kind of looking at. As far as the rec center itself, the building and the items, that stays the same. Again, I didn't bump the fuel on this basically because I felt as though it was pretty well set. Even if we get an increase, I think that number should cover it. Activity center and the town garage, kind of more of the same. Activity center, we do not pay the fuel on that, so that'll be borne by the daycare folks. I did decrease the maintenance expense a little bit on that area, is because a lot of what we're working on is covered under the capital improvement section, the floors and the budgeted roof. So you'll see a $2,000 decrease, I think it is there. Going to jump down to capital improvements. Gordon, this is, we kind of skipped there in the very beginning. Again, we talked about this last week, but the 2 projects we got pegged is $25,000 for the activity center roof and $12,500 for Damon Hall. If we were to contemplate bumping that, it would simply be to, budget a little bit more for the roof. But I think that 25 seems to be a somewhat of a safe number. Again, keeping projects doable that we can see through to the end there.
Four Corners Park. Dave.
Yeah, I highlighted that too.
So we'll save that for the end. We'll save that for town manager update.
Okay.
I believe that we've had some talk about lights and some other things. I think that that's being
The tree, yeah.
taken care of. And I had someone this morning tell me there's new growth at the bottom, so I'm going to let that. We have a tree cutting expense budget line item. If we need to cut it down, I think that what I'm looking for is simply a consensus for the board that it's time to go. What I may not have is money to replant it, but, we can always work that out. But we've been kind of on hold now for like a year and a half on that subject.
It's time to torch it. Oh, sorry, John, sorry, forgot you're here.
So I'm going to skip down to the bottom of page 8. When we get to buildings and grounds, here is where I have the labor for a summer person. Again, I mentioned the cemeteries, Sumner's Falls Park, North Hartland School area, Foster Meadows, just basically, again, Timmy takes care of the mowing. We have a buildings and grounds. Before it used to be kind of all encompassing. I don't think we ever really got out to Sumner's Falls. I don't think that we were capable of, doing everything to the quality that we're doing today. And we're looking to just kind of step that up because the buildings and grounds person, there is plenty of stuff to do with the buildings. Even if we don't contract that out, there is painting, there is just endless stuff. Every time he has to get up and spend 2 weeks out mowing lawns, just takes him away from that. So this is just beneficial. Again, as we envision it from like Memorial Day through till at least the end of Labor Day. If we can get a non-student, we'll push it a little bit further. I think with the 12,000 that we've got on there, we can do that. Gordon, you'll see some of the other expenses in there. We're gonna work off of that for now. And we'll kind of gauge it and see where we go for expenses once we get beyond the first season here. Cemeteries, I do have $4,000 budgeted for tree cutting. Don't think that that is going to occur for this year, but certainly there is more than enough trees in our cemeteries to cut. We were kind of depending on Dan and Tom and I can't remember his name up on Dunsmore, Bob Bibby. We're kind of guiding us as to which trees to cut. I think we're going to end up picking up that slack a little bit unless they can revitalize themselves. I've kept that number in here again for this year because I think that, that's just things that we need to be doing. It's just that with kind of slipped through the cracks this year, particularly with our labor shortage, and then with that committee kind of moving on to other things. Page 10, we have the grants filled. This is where the $5,000 expense comes in. It's a match for that ADA $50,000 planning grant. We may see expenses and revenue, but at the end of the day, $5,000 of those expenses are for sure ours. So we've got that budgeted, and we continue to move forward on that, and work with Tori over at Two Rivers on doing that. Appropriations, we actually have a slight decrease so far. Again, the timeline has not yet encroached upon us, but is growing near. The Woodstock Job Bank has decided not to ask for funding this year, and we're not anticipating, unless Curtis, I hear otherwise, we're not anticipating another ask from the mutual aid group. So there is a decrease there. Again, John will talk about his budget, but there is an increase in the fire department budget. I think it's 2% or less. So you'll see a slight decrease in the total appropriations. I'm going to slip over the library. Yes, you'll be up on that shortly. Miscellaneous, you'll see an increase there. It's a large percentage increase, but we go back to having to plan and buy the fireworks. I'm going to actually have to bump this up a little bit because Martin heard the other day that the fireworks crew, we were spending about $7,500 for fireworks. If we want fireworks on or around the 4th of July, the minimum ask now is 10 grand. And that is primarily due to inflation. And so we will be paying that much for probably the same show that we received last year, but it ensures us, otherwise we'll be doing fireworks on the 15th of July instead of.
I would go for that. We could save some money.
Fire department, so I'm gonna skip over real quick to the highway department, and again, this has traditionally been, and I'm stuck again, it's not gonna let me go there. Another reason we need to spend some money on this, so I'm gonna stay here because we do have the fire department in the library, but I will just go for those that have their budgets in front of them. In the highway department, the two biggest movers is that we have budgeted for the grants in aid projects. So you'll see about a $21,000 expense line item for grants and aid. On the revenue side, you see about $17,500. The difference between the two, again, is the local share. The subcontracting, culverts, and stone line items used to encompass the grants and aid projects as well. However, it's become difficult to track due to the materials and the work that we're doing these days. So I pulled that out and gave it its own line item. I did decrease the subcontracting by $10,000 to account for that, but it still gives us more money, I would say, for subcontracting culverts and stone, because I did not drop, I actually increased culverts 500 and stone a little bit, 1,500 maybe. Altogether, the net difference is about $11,000 increase. And again, that incorporates ditching for non-grants and aid projects. It incorporates culvert replacements and anything else that comes down the pike that we need somebody else to do, you know, whether we're busy with grading or, you know, blowing out culverts or whatever it is, and we need to pull somebody else in there. That subcontracting money is there for that. And we just simply need the culvert money to be there, and we are using more stone, whether it be during spring runoff or mud season, or whether it's the stone that goes in front of the culverts to keep from, you know, dirt and sediment from getting into the culverts, or, you know, other things. But I think we're utilizing that appropriately at this point, and it gives us a better product. Other than that, we finally get from 170 to 200,000 on the paving. It's been kind of a slow, painful process getting from 80,000 to 200, but we've done it this year. And those two things, kind of as a group, make up the big difference in the highway department.
Sure. And when we talk about reserve funds, we'll talk about the box culvert reserve fund.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask Curtis if he has. Curtis, do you have any questions?
No, it seems pretty straightforward to me.
Thanks, Curtis. Marty?
No, I don't.
So my numbers are stuck on the library, which is good because Nancy and Laura and company would be the next to give it a go.
Okay, Nancy?
Hi there, everybody. You can see a screen, so you can see me, I'm guessing.
We see your library numbers, Nancy, but everybody else can see you out of the corner of the screen.
Okay,
We can
and
hear you.
folks you can hear me. That's the most important part, is that you can hear me. Okay, so I wanted to let folks know, just go over a couple things you won't see on this sheet, and that's a few grants that the library is working through. They've either just ended. Pardon me?
I need to interrupt you for just a second.
What page are we on?
So on page 11 of 12,
11 of 12 is the library budget.
the library budget.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, Nancy, or Jan, who can turn down the volume? It's exceedingly painful.
Try now.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Is that a better volume?
Not for me, but maybe for some people in the back, it's okay. Okay, go ahead, we'll suffer the hearing loss, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I can try to move my mic away from my mouth. Is that any better?
No. Go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of things you won't see on this list are a few grants that the library received that have just worked through, or we're working through, or we will be continuing to work through into FY23. We received a $600 CARES Tech grant. That was some of the initial pandemic money. We got that from the Department of Libraries, and that was used for tech equipment and PPE. We also received a $600 Save the Children literacy grant, which was used to purchase books from Scholastic Publishing. And those were given out to the rec center this past summer. Amy did a program where she went over to the rec center during the summer program and read to kids and then gave them free books. So we still have some left. So she's hoping to do that again this summer. And we received a $3,000 American Library Association Libraries Transform Communities grant for basically outreach to all of Hartland, but specifically outreach to North Hartland. Amy McMullen applied for this grant, and she's working on services for North Hartland, possible pop-up library programming at different locations in Hartland. And then we've just received recently a $5,000 grant from the Association of Rural and Small Libraries. And this is for programming and staff computers and outreach, and also a $5,053.41 from the Institute of Museum and Library Sciences ARPA grant, which was administered through the Vermont Department of Libraries. This is a different ARPA money than municipalities will get. And so we purchased an OWL camera for virtual programming at the library, and we're also upgrading a lot of our older technology and computers that have needed to be upgraded for quite a long time. And besides staffing on our budget, the two things that have the biggest increase are, if you look at towards the bottom of that budget page, and you may have to go to page 12 of 12 to see that on the paper, is new equipment. We've bumped from $800 to $1,200. And that is because $800 is woefully low, as it's been that number for years. And as technology grows, and technology in libraries certainly grows and took a big bump during the pandemic, when we have 13 PCs at the library, we have 7 public and 6 staff. We have 2 laptops, 6 Chromebooks, and then all the peripherals that go with them, like scanners, keyboards, receipt printers, label writers, monitors. We also have our other hardware, our main router for the library, our Western Digital backup hard drive, and 2 wireless access points. So all of this, there's no way it can fit into $800. So the library board is trying to bump this up a little bit each year. In the past, the library board's annual appeal covered a great deal of the technology, and many of the grants that I just mentioned have also covered a bunch of this technology. So we're starting from a really good place, and we're developing technology replacement plans so that we can replace things on a rolling basis before they get, too old or unusable or break. And the other line item is our digital subscription services item took a hefty jump. And this contains our integrated library system, which is basically the library's database, the catalog, both the staff module that we use for reports and statistics and all of the back end stuff, as well as the patron module that patrons use. That's $1,300 a year annually. And we have membership in the Green Mountain Library Consortium, which provides this service and also provides the subscription to Overdrive, which is the digital ebooks and audiobooks. And that's about $1,400 annually. And that shifts a little bit up each year as it goes on how many library patrons you have. So as we give out more library cards and more people are using the library, that cost goes up a little bit. And we're also using Overdrive Advantage now, which these are specific digital ebooks and audiobooks that are just for Hartland library patrons. If you've ever used that service, sometimes there are long waiting periods because there are many libraries, many patrons, they may all be waiting for the same book. So that, and just as an aside, the usage of that particular service rose 47% during the pandemic and has not declined since the building's been open and more people are being in the library checking out books. So that's staying at a steady 47%. But unfortunately, the cost for digital materials is 3.5% higher than physical materials. And there's nothing we can do about that. We can't shop. There's no discount store. These prices are set by the publishers, and publishers and libraries have been trying to negotiate these things for years. And publishers also insist on one user at a time. So you think of it as it's a digital ebook. 20 people could read it, but the publishers say, no, we're only going to let you have one person read it. So that significantly ups the price for those materials. We also have Canopy, our streaming movies, which patrons get 5 plays a month, and the kids section is totally free. So folks can use this. It's a wonderful section with tons of stuff for kids. And that's about $350 to $450 a quarter. The Friends of the Library paid for that in the past, but they haven't had their book sale the past couple of years. So their funding has been a little down. And we also have 3 online databases, A to Z World Travel, A to Z World Food, and A to Z the 50 States, which are fabulous databases. All 3 of these are $200 annually. And we have 2 Wi-Fi hotspots at the library, which we've actually used. I don't know if anybody else notices, but Hartland loses electricity pretty often sometimes. And we've actually taken our Wi-Fi hotspot, which runs on cellular data. So it runs from cell service like your phone. And we've used it, the staff have put it at the front counter with a Chromebook, and we've used that data to be able to continue to check out patrons and things and not having to stop. So we've also used it. We've had some visitors in town that came to town and used it out on the front porch to be able to do things. When the power was out, they happened to be there and they were looking for some information or directions on how to get someplace. And so those are all great services. So those are all reasons for those 2 items to increase. And as you look at the other items, they've all had just modest, a few of them have had modest increases, such as postage, which is going up. Our telephone bill is due to go up a little bit, and things like that. And the majority of the increase is in staffing for both the 4.6 COLA that Dave talked about. And then also we've had a position at the library since I came on board in January of 2017. That was an 8-hour position, which has been terribly difficult to find someone to stay in that position. We've had 4 people now on our 5th person. So we've had 4 people in that position. And so we were basically training a person. I was training a person every year, getting that new person on board. And they would kind of just be, really getting up to speed and getting their teeth into things. And another opportunity would come along and they would leave. So the board took a look at this when we were ready to hire a person this summer and fall and upped the job responsibilities and the hours for this position from 8 hours to a 16-hour position. And this has become our community engagement librarian position. So this person does everything that the other person does, but is going to do more community outreach, working through that grant that Amy got and doing some programming as well. And so and we also are 2 part-time staff people. We are 2 full-time and 3 part-time people. And we have two people left this past year. We had someone retire and someone leave. So we replaced one person with that community engagement librarian position. And then the other person we replaced as well. And the board decided in reviewing the budget for pay equity, looking at other similar positions that, the pay was just really, really too low, looking at what other town starting wages for other town employees, as well as starting wages for employees in similar positions at libraries of a similar size in Vermont. So that's where we are in a nutshell. Are there any questions? And I know Laura is also in the room for questions as well.
Curtis, do you have any questions?
Not immediately, no.
Thanks, Martha.
No, I thought Nancy highlighted where the major increases are, the digital subscriptions and inflation on the salary side. So I'm set,
Gordon?
No, I don't. She's very thorough.
Nancy, I have some comments. I noticed the budget's gone up about 35% in 5 years, which seems to exceed the rate of inflation. I could be wrong about that, but and it was very, very troubling to me when the library, which is an arm of the town, supported by the taxpayers, many of us, depend on the library through tough times, and the library was closed and remained closed for a long time. And to see a budget increase, you could have also, during that time, I believe, put people on unemployment and the government had funds, they would have made more money. So I haven't expressed my deep dismay at the behavior that the library exhibited during times when Damon Hall was open. I don't see any difference at all between Damon Hall and the library.
I would love to speak to that.
Okay, I'm speaking to Nancy right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I would.
So it was, I feel, a grave disservice to the people who pay the salary there. This is just a personal opinion, but when you come to ask for an increase in the budget, and everything's very technical now, and the library has always been a center for community interaction. It was closed, when we needed the library the most, it was not there. So people went to other libraries where they were open for their public. Go ahead.
The library was actually open throughout the pandemic.
Really?
Yes.
I couldn't even return a book.
We got a new book return, and it's a lovely book return. return, and you can put the books in there. But it was open throughout the pandemic in the way that we could provide services. You were able to get books, both physical books and digital books. It was actually a time when our staff was, I think, although their labor has been invisible in that sense, consumed with pivoting to a new delivery of services that was required. I know that Damon Hall was open, and you say, what is the difference between Damon Hall and the Hartland Public Library? And I'll say, first of all, in a pandemic that's based around a respiratory virus, one of the main things I see is that you have 4 separate offices where people can be completely isolated from each other. And you have a giant room where you can open windows on both sides and have airflow through the building. And like the Windsor Library, for example, is a one giant room that you can open up, and the Hartland Library was built in what was originally the floor plan of a house. And it has an HVAC system that needs replacing and didn't have filters that could get updated. And not all the windows have screens, so you can't even open all the windows or create a different floor plan. There's only one bathroom. There are a number of reasons that are like just logistical, but in terms of safety in COVID with a respiratory virus and how people can be in rooms with airflow, it's completely different. And we had to make decisions based on the actual physical space that we were there in, and we didn't have any control over that. But it is a very different space. And we pivoted. It is very technological now, and I think there's nothing that people want more than to be able to come in and be there in those chairs and drinking a coffee and talking to your friend. I long for that as well. I long for us to be that again. And I mourn the loss of that, but all of those feelings about it doesn't make it a safe thing for us to do. And so we changed, we pivoted, we made decisions about how to reach out to our community, how to try to, get new laptops. Can people not get Wi-Fi at their house? Then we will buy these cell hotspots so that people who need to apply for jobs can borrow a Chromebook, get a Wi-Fi hotspot, apply for jobs, do stuff with their children. Make it like we now have a router where our Wi-Fi service extends way into the parking lot so that when kids needed to do their schoolwork remotely, they could come and be in cars I get it. This has been a terrible time. And it's also been like this amazing challenge and opportunity, and we've been so blessed to have a librarian who actually understands technology. I mean, Nancy is so much, she actually knows the answers to those questions that I'd be Googling on and would probably end up with the wrong piece of technology, and we have someone who can help us make that pivot, and I am so relieved because we wouldn't have been able to answer those questions. And so it is an increase, and a lot of it's technology, and a lot of it for people who actually...
It's here, we might as well just sell it to everybody, it'll be...
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, maybe the doors weren't open, but we asked so much of our staff. And it is not like they were sitting around with their feet up eating bonbons. They worked so hard. We are so proud of them. I honestly, seeing the behind the scenes at How Much Labor Day today. And so to have people say, oh, you were closed, you didn't do anything, you should have just been at home, is really deeply...
I don't know who said that. I certainly did not say that.
Okay. Well, I mean, to say that we should have just shut down and had unemployment instead because we were doing nothing.
No, I don't think I said that either.
Okay. So I guess I will pivot and say I'm really proud of what our staff put in. I'm really proud. I'm sorry that I honestly wish we could just throw off the masks and open the doors and have a big party and bring everybody back in to do all those things we used to do. I want that day again.
Nobody's suggesting that either.
Yeah. But we weren't closed. Our staff has worked incredibly hard. We are trying to do even more, and that is where we're going. And I'm to the extent that you expressed unhappiness about our staffing budget increases, I feel that they are in fact justified by the labor that our employees have put in over the past couple of years.
Well, I'm glad you're here to describe that and defend that budget, because it's difficult for me to look at that and understand where that's coming from.
If I hadn't been involved in the way that I've been involved, I'm sure I would also have questions. But I've been seeing the work that's going in there. And I'm really proud of our staff.
That's great. Sarah, behind you, wants to say something.
Yeah, I just like to, as quickly as I possibly can.
Sarah, can you come up here, please? I forgot about that.
Can I just stand up?
I don't know. Can
You need to get
can you
closer.
hear-
You talk loud enough? Stand up.
I'd just like to make a follow-up comment to this person who I'm afraid I don't even know who she is, and I'll meet her later. It did seem to me that initially, when everything shut down, nothing to do with the library, to do with COVID, that it took a while, but they got it done. And they figured out how to get the books out and how to get us to know what books were there. And to be really honest, I think I've taken more books out of the library than I did before. Because they put it on the listserv as to what all the new books are, and you can just, boop, go borrow, and 2 days later you pick it up on the porch. Now you can go inside. But yes, the doors were closed, but the people were inside and working, and I think they did a really good job of communicating with the residents via the listserv mostly, so people not on the listserv problematic. And I know there was frustration in the beginning with the parents, especially with kids and not being able to get there. But the library solved that problem the best possible way they could. And I think they did an awfully good job. That's all.
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else have a comment?
I do.
Curtis?
Yeah. So about 12 months ago, this time, well, 12 to 10 months ago, because we got extended a little bit, we were in the midst of a kind of extended, contentious debate about the budget that we had and we passed last year. And there were lots of moving parts to it. But one of the things that I found that was sort of like most gratifying to me to learn was exactly how much you care about the library, Mary. There are few people that I have met in my life who are as passionate about access to the library as I have seen you be. And I think it's really cool. I think it's a really important service that we have and that we make available. And I think being able to use that passion and thinking about not only in problematic time or in troubled times, not only having access to books, but also having access to the community aspects of the library, might recommend to us thinking about putting the library high on the priority list for ARPA projects. If we're thinking about HVAC system that could handle filtration, or if we're thinking about screening appropriate windows so that we can get nice cross ventilation, whatever it is, given the passion that exists for this vital community service, I think we should really keep it high in our minds when we're thinking about ARPA funds.
Well, thank you for pointing out that I am a library lover, not a library hater. Thank you very much.
You are.
And Mary, could I just make a comment or two?
Yes, Nancy, please do.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up with Curtis for a minute about what you were saying about the ARPA funds and how much the community does love the library. And I did actually kind of float this by Dave just in passing, but one thought and something that people really missed was being able to gather someplace safely. And we do have the porch, and that's great, but it is a little narrow. So if you're doing that 6-foot distance, that became challenging. We do have pop-up easy ups, but we get wind and thunderstorms and things like that can happen. And we have a back deck on the library that hardly anyone uses. A lot of people don't even know it's there. And one thought I had was making an extension of that deck with a rooftop. So it was a bit like a little pavilion that you could actually put those, stand-up heaters on if you wanted to, and extend the seasonality of it. And groups could meet there, library programming could take place there. People could visit with each other there, and it could be a real extension of the library. So that was one thought I had when I heard ARPA funding, because I immediately thought of what couldn't we do well during this time? And that was the piece that we couldn't do well, was having community gather. Although I must say, on the other hand, we had some evening programming, virtual programming during the winter that I heard from older folks that they loved this. There were people that were alone, that weren't able to get out. They didn't drive at night. They didn't drive a lot in the winter. And we were able to gather at night for book discussions, for library programs, and have a cup of tea and visit that way. And that was really life-giving for people. We also, the staff took, not many people know about this, but we took a lot of phone calls, and we also made phone calls to some community members, and community members would call us just to chat because they were lonesome. And we did some of that. We talked about books, we talked about Hartland, we talked about different things like that. And as Laura said, that we did pivot quickly to curbside, to take and make things. We did a podcast. We learned how to do it. None of us had done one before, but we learned how to do it. It's just hit some higher listens, so that's great. And really, really tried to look at, we would ask people when they called, what are you missing? And someone said, I can't fax something. And we said, yes, you can. Come here and we'll take it, we'll fax it, and we'll give it right back to you. I can't copy something. Yes, you can. Bring it to us. Can I email you a document, and will you scan and email it to this person for me because I don't have a scanner? Yes, you can. So we kept trying to say yes as much as possible for things. And I realized that it was very, very difficult. And a lot of libraries were in the same boat as us. And a lot of libraries, had their building open partially, had their building open fully, had their building completely closed. And it all depended mostly, like Laura was saying, on the staffing, the makeup of the building. Could we do it safely? And just trying to make the best decisions that we could. So I just wanted to follow up with those couple of things. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Phil's got a question.
Mary, you threw out, I believe I heard, a 35% increase.
Mm-hmm. In 5 years, over 5 years.
Okay, my math doesn't show that, but I won't dispute that. So you're saying over a 5-year period?
Yeah,
Okay.
from 158 to 213.
Okay. I didn't.
There could be a big portion of that being health insurance. We had some bumps of people taking family insurance at times. So that's not all of it. That's part of it.
Okay, thank you very much, Nancy. As Curtis said, my passion about this reflects the depth of my passion. My disappointment is the same as my passion for the library, so thank you. Thanks, Laura.
Dana has something, I think.
Hi, I'm Dana Jacobson, I'm the treasurer for the library, and I just wanted to ask Nancy, I can't open the draft of our annual report, but we had some statistics in there that you might be able to speak to about how
She may not be able to hear you, I don't know.
It's more about Nancy speaking, because I can't remember the statistics, but, and this goes back to sort of what Laura was saying as well, how creative our librarians have been. Mm-hmm. And in fact, Nancy, do you have the statistics there of the subscriptions or the circulation that has increased during COVID?
I did mention that earlier, that we did have a 47% increase of the digital audiobooks and ebooks that has stayed up. So our overall circulation is up.
So I think that just speaks to the creativity that we found during this time of hardship. So,
Thank you. Okay, I think we're done, library. And now the Hartland Volunteer Fire Department. John Sanders.
Good evening.
Yeah, John, I have a lot to say. No kidding, you can relax, I have nothing to say.
I would like to clarify that we are actually asking for a 2.24% increase this year, or $1,600, up from $71,400 to $73,000, consistent with the 2% increase that we asked for last year, and we went over by about 2%. Cost of materials is going up, everything's getting more expensive, and we are dipping into our donation fund a reasonable amount to try to make up for these overages. So I think a 2% raise is 2% increase is a good idea. I will be asking for 1,000% increase to my raise, and I continue to get paid absolutely nothing, as do my officers and my 32 volunteers. And I think they're all doing a great job. And I'm happy to answer any questions on our operating budget, and I can talk briefly to our forestry truck considerations for next year.
That's too bad. We had you for like a $2,000 increase, so we'll go with what you want, John.
Specifically, we are raising electricity up $100 just to match trending. Our mutual aid dues, which are specifically the Scutney repeater, which I'm a chairperson on that board. I also don't get paid anything to do that job. And we maintain the radio systems on top of the Scutney Mountain and on top of Green Mountain. And we're working to improve the communication network we have with the 6 towns that use that by way of the Hartford Dispatch Center, and we're backed up by the Hanover Dispatch Center. The dues for that every year are $2,000 per town, and they're going up to $3,000 per town. So we will be sharing the increase with the rescue squad. And then we're also increasing our vehicle maintenance budget, which has taken it hard the last few years, and the last few months have been particularly difficult this fiscal year. And we're going up by $1,000 in our vehicle maintenance. And we are leaning heavily on Sable & Sons to do our annual vehicle inspections. They're doing a great job, but they are not a cheap outfit to work with. But they're keeping us safe on the road and higher in-service time. Any questions?
Martha, this is just a little question. The very first line says payroll, $2,400.
Yeah, we have a secretary that we pay $200 a month. Her name is Kim Beebe. She replaced Amber Erskine, and she's doing a great job. She's Alan Beebe's wife.
Curtis?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Reflect it's Amber Barrows. I apologize.
Thank you.
Curtis, go ahead.
John, I just wanted to ask how last year you came to us talking about your 2 new young volunteer firefighters. Have they persisted through the year? They've been doing spectacular work.
Yeah, so last year we had 3 new volunteer firefighters, and I think I'm probably going to botch this on the fly, but we have Lydia Wood, we have Lydia Wood, Ryan Tefner, and we have Spencer Williams, and we have one other person, Jaden Sanborn, and they are all actively participating in the Firefighter 1 course. They just completed the 8-hour-long burn building training yesterday at the Vermont Fire Academy. They're doing excellent. And we have 2 new firefighters that have joined this year. So we still remain about 32 people, plus or minus, and they're doing great. Thank you for asking.
That's really great to hear. Thanks a lot, John.
John, you want to expand on that class, Firefighter 1 that you and Alan put together?
Sure. So Alan Beebe is the lead instructor. Alan Beebe is paid to be a state. Lydia Wood calling me. Oh, perfect. we have it's a state-sponsored firefighter 1-2 curriculum. It started in August, I believe. It's an accelerated curriculum. They've been meeting Mondays and Wednesdays for 4 hours each night, and many Saturdays. And it's an accelerated course. It's being taught by a good group of instructors, and it's benefiting basically all of our neighboring towns plus a little bit. We have people driving up from Springfield and further south, and we even have a few New Hampshire departments that are coming over to get training, and we'll get reciprocity back with their state.
So that's what's going on up here?
Yep, the only out-of-pocket expense for us is probably a little higher heating bill, a few more septic pumpings, and just keeping the building comfortable. But it's a state-sponsored course, so that's what's been happening.
That's impressive turnout.
It's an impressive turnout. Apparently, it's a really good group. Normally, they have a big diminish in the wintertime, and it's staying strong. I think the fast-paced class is going good. I actually will be taking the Firefighter 2 curriculum starting at the first of the year, and we'll have a few more members that will join and a few that will drop out from the Firefighter 1 and call that quits. So.
You guys have anything?
I'm all set.
Just to touch on it, there's a forestry truck that is due for replacement this coming year. So I asked Dave to put an article together, or worked with Dave to put an article together of roughly, there were 3 quotes. Roughly $150,000, roughly $175,000, and roughly $185,000. We have not selected which one we will get, so we're going with the middle one for now for budgeting purposes. And from what I'm hearing, all of these trucks will buy a chassis. Probably won't get that chassis for roughly 8 months to 12 months, just because of how new vehicle deliveries are going. And then the vehicle will be assembled as a brush truck or fire truck. So we want to get moving on this. This is, I think we delayed it 1 year, and this is the good time to go in. And my guess is we can probably split that money between 2 fiscal years, if that makes sense, to get moving on the chassis order.
Okay. Thanks a lot, John.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for your time tonight. So the last bit of the fiscal year 23 budget discussion is the fund balance reserve policy.
So Mary, if you like, we can, if you want to maybe bump this to after the climate resolution article, or we can wrap it up now. But we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 climate article folks that maybe we want to belt out. And the staff doesn't, you know, the fund balance reserve policy, staff doesn't need to stay for, so they can exit and you can take care of the climate resolution first, and that will give us a little time to take care of the other one.
Boy, they would be missing a thrilling.
I know, I feel bad for them, but, you know. So Sarah, you know, we are bumping you up. So we're going to do new business, climate resolution article. Really?
Okay, well, good evening. It is definitely evening, and thank you for the time in this meeting. I am here to present a climate resolution to the select board. I believe you have the text in front of you, but I think it's appropriate for me to read it for the record. Do you agree?
Yes.
And also for audience and people on Zoom. The town and residents of Hartland, Vermont recognize the reality of climate change and the effect it is having and will have on the town. The town and residents of Hartland, Vermont resolve to do our fair share to ensure that the state of Vermont reaches the 2025, 2030, and 2050 goals of the Vermont Comprehensive Energy Plan to reduce total energy consumption, meet the remaining 90% of energy needs from renewable sources, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Last week, I sent links to both the 2022 update of the Comprehensive Energy Plan, referred to as CEP, and the just released on the 1st of December Vermont Climate Council's Climate Action Plan, the CAP. I sent these to Dave to forward to you, and I trust you all received.
We have them.
I'm here tonight representing the Hartland Energy Committee. We formally request that the Select Board add this resolution to the 2020 warning for presentation and discussion at the 2022 town meeting, followed by a vote by Australian ballot. We especially request a vote by Australian ballot to maximize the number of Heartlanders that have the opportunity to cast a vote on this resolution. Further, we request that the Select Board place the resolution or article on the warning on the board's own motion. We think this is a reasonable request because, firstly, the climate resolution that Hartland residents submitted to the Select Board 2 years ago had the required number of signatures. I have a printout of the scans of those signature pages if you would like to review them. Secondly, the non-binding advisory vote, which was the form of the 2020 petition that appeared under the warning under other business, also called Article 12, passed unanimously at the 2020 town meeting. I want to close with a brief quote from Jennifer Morris. She's the CEO of the Nature Conservancy, and in the recent publication, she was describing the Nature Conservancy's 2030 climate goals. I think it applies equally to Vermont's Comprehensive Energy Plan and climate goals. Achieving these goals will require collaboration, audacity, and drive. We'll need to rely on our traditional strengths and deploy innovative new approaches and partnerships. I'd like to next ask Carl Chemnitzer. He recently compiled some really, I think, extraordinarily convincing data demonstrating the effect of climate change on Hartland. Not on Vermont, not on America, not on Windsor County even, as I talked about.
We got it.
On things. So he's going to talk about that. And then Rob Andre and Sarah Wood from the Conservation Commission would also like to say a few words.
Well,
Thank you. And then we'll all take questions.
Okay.
Or do you want questions?
Well, I just wanted to make it clear that we can't have this done by Australian ballot. If we're voting in town meeting on a resolution, you can't also put it to Australian ballot.
No, what we're suggesting is that the presentation and the discussion, the back and forth, the learning is in the town meeting. And then I think you recognize that most people that are physically present at town meeting follow up by coming downstairs to vote. Or maybe they do it before.
So let me clarify what I think Gordon's.
You can't have two votes, I agree that.
So the town has not opted to, so last year we had a 1-year gimme by the state to do Australian ballot. We're not entirely sure that's gonna happen this year. So all the town's voting occurs at town meeting. It wouldn't be by Australian ballot regardless, it would just be from the floor. The only thing that statutorily then requires us to do something by Australian ballot is essentially a borrowing article, a bond.
Is what article?
Like if you're bonding, borrowing from, otherwise with town meeting, you can't split it up and do, we do the voting by floor, so that's where it would be.
Sarah, weren't you at the library's presentation about town meeting? Didn't I see your name? Didn't you attend the library presentation about town meeting?
Susan Clark's presentation. Susan Clark was, she wrote a book about town meeting.
Yes, oh, absolutely, I read the book, yes.
Okay, then you ought to understand. Town meeting is important. And it's a
Gordon,
very
I
good
do
way.
not, I don't question that at all.
Okay, well then,
Not at all.
I just don't like to hear that Australian ballot stuff. It doesn't make any
Recognize,
sense.
guys,
What
that-
you said doesn't make any sense, and it's not a good way for us to go, even with this issue.
Okay. I'm very impressed with town meetings. I moved here, you guys probably know, in 2015. First town meeting was 2016. And I walked in there and I thought, oh my God, I learned about these in grade school. And they're actually here.
Right.
And I was so impressed.
Yeah.
And I'm still impressed. I have no question about that. But I still think, guys, we gotta get realistic. We gotta be more, we gotta extend participation. But maybe not this time. Carl?
It doesn't work.
Thank you for your time. Does everybody have you seen the PowerPoints?
Yeah, we got these. We got
Okay,
it.
so do you have any questions? Or just-
It's very depressing, Carl, very, very depressing.
It is. The very first slide here, the 2.9 degrees increase over 72 years. When I think about what it takes to heat my house, and to think that all the mountains are 2.9 degrees warmer, all the streams, the air, it is pretty scary to think that we've managed to pull that off. So, just in 1 minute here, I took the weather measurements from the Lebanon airport, which is 6.5 miles away from Central Town Road. So it's our weather. And that's the long-term trend is we've gone from 43.5 degrees after 46 after 71 years. And then the frost, the first frost and all that, we picked up like 33 days of heating frost-free season in the summer over 72 years. It's, you know, you don't notice these changes from year to year, and that most people are, I will say that there's some people that still are around, even though we've had a lot of discussion of climate change over the last few decades, and you just don't see them. It's a small percent every year, but when you start looking at the records over 70 years, it really adds up. The heating degree days, winter's warming faster than summer, which I've heard from other sources, and it shows up here. And then we have had quite a large increase in the precipitation in Hartland. So it's 23%. These are all average figures. See, when you go year to year, the variation in the weather can swamp out the small amount that it increases by year. But looking at it over 71 or 72 years, depending on the records, that is how you can see the trend. And then on the last page, I put in some of the other sources. I wanted to be sure that I wasn't going way out in the weeds on these figures. And pretty much we're in agreement with things like the Vermont Climate Action Plan. So, and then Sarah came up with all these citations down at the bottom too, which is about mosquitoes and warmer weather and the growing season and the mountains, as the ski season and maple sugars. So it is, we're changing, and it's time with the Comprehensive Energy Plan and the Global Warming Solutions Act and the Climate Action Plan. It is time that we started paying more attention and including it in our plans more than we have been. So that's what I have to say.
So you made a PowerPoint.
Yes, that's this.
Are you showing it somewhere?
No, I printed it out here.
I know, but why did you make it a PowerPoint? Are you presenting this?
Because
on
my
the
report
screen?
is a lot wordier and I would not be able to fit it in a minute or two here.
Oh, okay.
So I chopped it down to just the slides.
I see.
Short for the-
So the slides are,
I do have a report if you want to read it.
is it like the CEP and the CAP?
Is it less than 200 pages?
Yeah, is it less than 200?
It's, what is it, 15 pages, and half of that is just tables. You don't have to read the tables.
So my point is, when I make a PowerPoint, it's because I'm presenting it at a meeting.
Well,
It's
part
also
of
a
the,
good way to just do slides for,
yeah,
just to condense it.
part of this is we realize that there is people who just don't realize that climate change is happening. And as an energy committee, we constantly run into people that we have to talk and try to convince them that something is happening. And they're not going to read through a report. So we need the shorthand version, we need the slides for them. So,
Thank you.
so I can send you PDFs of that report if you want. I just, in the interest of time, I tried to chop it down to a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Mary, I would say that these PowerPoints in particular were prepared for tonight's presentation, rather than just giving you that text with some graphs. And so that's where it started, in response from questions, well, you know, give me proof that climate change is happening in Hartland.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I can't give you proof, but I'll give you evidence. And we had some evidence that I presented in August, you may recall, for the state and for the county. And then Carl took it one step further and really focused right in on Hartland. And so that's why. And I think these will very well likely use as an educational tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the past, it's been state data. You know, the organizations, the agencies are able to amass the data, but this is, it made sense just to go to our local national weather station that's close to us.
It is very effective.
And pull it together. So.
Carl, what about today? How do you convince people that today was not a wonderful day, which you might not have had without global warming?
Yeah, I can't convince them that because the variability, the range is big enough that today could have fit into it. You have to have a many-year trend in order to be able to see it. Yeah, I'd have to look up like record highs and record lows to give you.
Most people rely on their memory, which is only good for a few years.
Memory is a terrible thing.
No, but that's what people rely on.
People can't remember from one year to the next for a lot of things.
It's true, I can't.
So never mind several years.
No.
So that's why it's really nice to have this weather data, because they have a consistent data collection method that goes back since they started. So you can compare from the beginning to the end of the records, and you know that the measurements were taken the same way. So it's consistent, and there's very little to argue about in this data. So if anybody wants the report, I can send a PDF.
So do you want this back, or can I keep this?
You can have it.
Okay, thanks. So, Sarah, did you want to talk?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Wood, and I'm coming to talk along with Rob from the Hartland Conservation Commission. And actually, Sarah Bruce came and gave us a presentation about the resolution, and we just wanted to come to express our support. And particularly, you know, as a town governance unit, for us, the important things about the SEP and the CAP, whatever you want to call it, is the intersection, which for the Conservation Commission really rests in preparedness and mitigation. I think I was a part of the original climate and resolution that we presented at the town meeting, which I agree with Gordon is like the best part of Vermont. But what was great is that Dave gave this wonderful presentation of roads. And you could see every time the road budget had to increase, it was after a big storm, because Hartland has 832 waterways. I mean, it's a crazy town when you look at the Otokoichi map. But it also is a fantastic town. It's got old trees. It's got a lot of like non-porous surfaces. It's got lots of natural installations that actually can prepare road crews to do roads differently over time, you know, anticipating severe storms and constant runoff and doing natural berm rather than always culverts, things like that. And so for us, we just wanted to come and just say, you know, there's planning that can be done in coordination with other commissions and other governance units in town that I think will position us for grants having to do with preparedness and mitigation. And also, quite frankly, as a conservation commission, a perfect example is invasives. I mean, are they going to be invasives in 10 years if the weather warms? Like there's things that we have to consider for landowners too, because the way we thought to manage land is going to change. And I think the town could benefit from just, having a conversation and forget climate change and global warming, but really talk about the changes that we're going to anticipate and how to prepare kind of our resources here, because it's an amazing town. So we have some ideas on the commission. One is to do a town atlas. What are the resources that we have within the town that protect from severe storms. So some landowners could do natural burning along their roadways that would help mitigate damage over time. And then also just think about kind of conservation land management, more forward-leaning. There's been a lot of examples in New England, and Hartland's well-positioned to kind of continue that trend. And that's it.
Thank you.
That was my backup pattern.
So the Union of Concerned Scientists has done some modeling, and they say by the end of this century, the climate in Vermont will be about like the current climate in West Virginia.
Oh my God.
That's best case. Worst case is Tennessee. So I got nothing against West Virginia. John Denver thought it was almost heaven, but they don't have moose, they don't have maple syrup, they don't have a lot of things that we really treasure. So we need to get serious about climate change. The resolution, I think, is almost incidental, because what we really need is for the Selectboard, the Conservation Commission, and the people of Hartland to be taking some action to get this under control. To Gordon's point about, well, a nice day like this, it's hard to convince somebody's a bad thing. But if you look at, the number of ticks we have now, there's a half dozen tick-borne diseases that we didn't have 5 years ago. We have a bunch of the emerald ash borer, the spotted lanternfly is knocking on the door in Massachusetts. Those things wouldn't survive a cold winter here, and as the winters get warmer and warmer, they're going to be increasingly a problem. The hemlock woolly adelgid is another one, spruce budworm is another one, and so our forests are under some serious attack. And again, we need to get serious about doing something about this. The Conservation Commission, mostly what we can do is education. We don't have a big budget, we don't have any buildings, we don't have a lot of other stuff. But we can try to be as creative as possible in getting the word out. But I think it's really important that the Selectboard take action too. So that's, I'll stop there and have questions for anybody in the group.
Thanks, Rob.
Yep.
Well, first, thank you to the four of you for coming and presenting. I have two types of comments. One is a little frivolous. I found the action plan to be, I was pleased at their attempts to make things equitable across society and across Hartland. I mean, I'm very aware of the number of old pickup trucks that are going to run for a long, long time because that's what people can afford. Plus, I learned some new phrases, moving at the speed of trust. I really sat with that for quite a while. No, I was spinning, I'm sorry. I rode my bike with that for quite a while today. So I do feel from attempting to read the whole report and then settling in on the executive summaries that the data is there. There's no question about it. And thank you, Carl, for bringing it home to Hartland. I would just ask my colleagues, what can we do? You know, we have something in front of us here that I feel strongly that we should support. And we'd like to find a creative way to sort of let our fellow citizens know that we support this, and we would like to have their involvement in just getting information and learning about what they could do as individuals.
I think tonight, the question before us is, are we going to put it on the warning, or will we ask the Energy Committee to get signatures? So that's what I want to discuss and resolve tonight. All right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tonight's issue.
Mary, I'm
Yes.
sorry, could you repeat what you
Yeah,
said?
thank
about
you.
the
I
Energy
couldn't hear
Committee?
you.
You couldn't hear me? That's usually not a problem. So the issue before us tonight is whether we, as a select board, put the resolution on the warning ourselves or ask the Energy Committee to go and get signatures. Yes.
This is just me speaking, but it seems to be, would make more sense to put it on the warning. And the reason I say that is because I think town meeting is a chance to discuss things. And so by having it on the warning, rather than doing signatures, you get more people and a wider diversity of people. And maybe people even that disagree with it. You know, and so the advantage of that is that you get a town discussion.
Well, the signatures are just to get it on.
Oh, I see what you're, but I think what Sarah's point was, we kind of already did it 2 years ago, and does it really need more signatures? Because, I don't know, maybe Dave has the answer, but it seems like we wouldn't need to because it's similar enough. But.
I think that part of our thinking was that it would be an opportunity for you to go out and talk with people.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But personally, I think it would be fine with me to rely on your judgment, and if you think us just putting it on is the best way to go, I don't have a problem with that.
And I agree with you on that, on both counts.
Yeah.
Or what, Phil?
I agree with Gordon that there could be benefit of soliciting the signatures because there could possibly be interaction. So that's a big possibility, and I'd be very comfortable with getting it on the town meeting.
Interactions this time around with COVID is a little more difficult in terms of getting signatures, so that's not quite as I don't think that's quite a strong positive.
Okay.
Yeah.
I do think
So
that
should
we
we just
have,
do it?
I think it was 166 signatures or thereabouts, 150, something like that, 2 years ago, basically saying very similar things. From my perspective, and I think from the Energy Committee type perspective, and I would say from an awful lot of people in the state, that we have an enormous problem in front of us. We have an enormous problem. And it's only getting bigger because we've been ignoring it for decades. And I think we have to come to the agreement as a community that we have a problem and we are going to work to fix it. That's what I think this says. And I think this says voted by whatever percentage of the population we can get to vote on it, is we're getting input from the residents, all the residents, not just the ones I happen to find, not just the 150 that I happen to find to sign the thing, the 150 that will vote for it at the town meeting. I don't know that it'll be the same 150, but it's input from the residents saying, yes, we agree this is a problem, and we agree we have to do something. And that, to me, sets in motion, well, that's the partnership between the Energy Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Select Board, and the residents, and the Planning Commission, because you'll note in particular one of the interesting things in the CAP is this whole idea of land use and energy. So the planning commissions are gonna get involved in this too. So we're getting all of these people working in partnership to try, not to try, to work to improve the situation for the future. To me, you cannot deny that we have a problem. And so we accept it and we act to try and mitigate it and also adapt. So there are two things: mitigation, trying to reduce it so that it isn't as bad as it will be if we do nothing, and also adapt to the changes. And as Phil pointed out, there's a huge emphasis in the CEP and the CAP that this has to be an equitable thing.
Okay, I'm just going to interrupt you there, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because this is an extremely important topic, and there's a lot to say about it. But tonight, we're just going to, we want to make a motion to resolve the question before us, okay? And your points are very well taken, well spoken, and very much appreciated. So the lawyer will, the town's lawyer will have to look at this and just make sure it's okay. But there's a couple of grammar things that I think Martha and I would agree that need to be changed.
What, grammar? Okay.
It's not grammar, but I have one question about the wording of the resolution. And I'm sure you put a lot of thought into it, and it may be that you did it for a reason, but the part that says our fair share, I think that sounds a little vague. And I don't know if you purposely want it to be open-ended, or that's just my comment about the wording.
Well, I think in a way this comes from CAC, I believe, is that everybody does their part.
Yes.
And maybe that we will do our part would be a better phrase. No problem. But I think it is every resident, every town, every county is going to have to address this. Some have addressed it already quite a bit, others have not. And everybody's trying to work towards something. And so I just think this, with a positive vote, this simply says the town of Hartland agrees that this is a problem and we need to move forward with mental action.
Thank you.
So the Our Fair Share, I served on the Hartford Climate Action Plan. The Our Fair Share has a lot to do with people who say that it doesn't matter what we do. The rest of the world, like China and the other countries, are just going to swamp us. But it's basically the idea everybody does their part or their fair share.
Okay. Who is going to determine what our part is?
We will.
Part of it is Two Rivers.
So that's part of the process of both the Vermont Climate Action Plan and the Hartford Climate Action Plan that I took part in. You have a process that helps to determine what gets done.
And in large part, Two Rivers has already said many of the things that each town in their region need to do to achieve the 2025, et cetera, goals. And so that is what they calculated to be Hartland's fair share or part compared to the other towns in that region.
Mary, I'd like to make a motion, but I'm struggling with the exact words, so maybe we could figure that out collectively.
Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we, the select board, include a warning on the town meeting for 2022. And then I don't know if I should include the exact wording that's here or sort of say as presented.
This won't be the last time you see this. The warning always gets reviewed and it'll come back, but.
Okay, so in this, something that, in the spirit of what the Energy Committee has suggested?
You just agreed to put, put on the warning the resolution presented tonight, and
Climate resolution.
Climate resolution. I would just leave it at that.
Okay.
You agree to put the climate resolution on. When it comes to the warning, it's a select board warning. You'll need to make changes if needed. So I wouldn't pigeonhole yourself into taking the exact language, but
okay.
Just you agree to put it on the warning, climate resolution.
because Martha's been typing, so we'll ask her to.
I think she's got it.
See if this is what you want it to say. Motion that we include on the warning for town meeting 2022, the climate resolution presented by the Energy Committee.
Okay, Curtis, do you want to second that?
Sure, I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, motion passes.
And just get back to us if there's changes in the phrasing, no problem, definitely open to that if the spirit of the resolution is there.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be much. Thank you very much. Thank you all of you.
Thank you.
You too. Okay, so,
Fund balance.
so now we will circle back. Well, maybe we should stand up, you know, I want to stand up. Sitting for 2 hours does not help.
You know, I learned that stand-up trick from a bunch of Texans when I was on the American Sheep Industry committee of some sort. And at first I thought they were gonna walk out or something. But they were all kind of like just
Yeah,
waking up a little bit more.
yeah, it's just not good to sit that long.
Yeah.
Be safe out there, Carl.
For what it's worth, they managed to put another article out for signatures, but they didn't seem to have any issues
This
with
is
it.
my 5th year without a car.
Wow.
You have no car?
No, no. So this will be my 5th winter. We'll see, I'm up for it still.
I just came to wake you up.
Wow, wow, Carl, just be careful.
Oh yeah, the drivers around here are quite good. I found that the road infrastructure was designed for cars.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And, well, I talked with Tom about this. He saw me on the coming a while back, and I had a lot of conversations. But that's why I'm collecting the signatures for road shoulders for a petition for that. I swear, it's the easiest petition to collect signatures for in all my time on the Energy Committee.
Really?
You just hand it to people and say, we want safer roads and 3 cars for them. And they don't even blink twice.
Yeah, yeah, good. Well, just have a safe ride home, Carl.
Thanks. Dave, Ron has asked me to take pictures. I have pictures of these two from the art shows, but he wants me to take pictures of the other ones. Is there some time that's good to come in and take pictures?
Yeah, you can come in, normal business hours.
Normal
We'll
hours?
let you down here, yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to have another one, so they have like 2 petitions. that they're signatures for. Yeah, we don't see that problem getting signatures from those.
My sister-in-law thought they went, they sold the tractor supply, it looks like a diamond, and it's like crystals. So I've been using that.
Would've got mine, there's no,
Instead of a wedge in.
they just wanted to make a,
I can put, if I cut down far enough, I can put that wedge and get it one. So that it go away.
Right.
It's great.
friendly for.
I like it. Yeah,
This,
and she's
are
got
we,
these huge pieces.
are we taking
I
the
cut
piece
3
of-
boards way down through and then I.
There's the camera's not on now.
I split it the
Where
rest
is
of the
it?
way.
I know, it probably is.
It's gotta be, so my bar is 18 inches, I think it's
At
22
this point,
inches
do you
across.
see
And I get that from both sides.
normal town meeting happening?
Yeah, it's some big wood.
It's tough to say, you know,
December, January.
So the logger, they cut it down. It's like about.
the problem is we'll need to make a decision by like the end of January. So we got a short, we ran into this last year, we got a short window to decide, because the warning for town meeting needs to go out. If it's gonna be normal date and however it gets worn. So if it's Australian ballot, it needs to get worn one way. If it's town meeting, it needs to get worn the other. So that needs to be out at the end of January on any normal time frame. So we need
The
to,
legislature hasn't said anything about this.
they have not acted as of yet.
So that makes me think.
I'm hearing rumors that they may.
Holy cow.
Well, they're not in session now.
They're not in session
Well,
until,
but last year they had a.
Do they have a special
session or something?
last year, it was already
This little guy is
like
right now, so he can float around with it.
Maybe it was-
definitive. It was like, they were like, you know, as soon as we get back, we're gonna pass legislation to make this. And so the LCU was putting out guidance and stuff at this point last year. I have not heard anything that strong yet, other than, you know, if, you know, we just had the highest number of COVID cases, you know, this past weekend, I think it was. So if this continues, I think that I'd be shocked if they didn't make it an option.
That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Taking a break.
I know, we need one. Okay, we're
I've
back,
been thinking that for months.
and our esteemed town manager is going to talk to us about an issue that we bypassed and are circling back to, let's see, what is it, the reserve?
So, yeah, so part of the budget discussion, and actually why this is all kind of on the agenda for tonight. So just to recap, the fire department is a social agency. They normally would ask for an appropriation. And we have in the past, last year, said that the select board, the same decision that you just made, will put them on their article on the ballot, provided that the increase isn't, you know, so at some point if the increase was like 15%, you'd say, okay, this is too big for us to gauge, you gotta go out and get signatures and come back. So that is one. The second one was the energy, the climate resolution article. You had that decision. As part of the discussion, which is essentially revolves around the general fund balance, which is the one that technically needs to be addressed over time. What to do with that would also be an article on, or multiple articles on the ballot. And what I have talked to you about is, hey, and again, I'm going to stick with the general fund mostly for this discussion, is there is always a day where, you know, you wake up and Mill Street Bridge is, you know, out of whack. Or Hurricane Irene rolls into town and you've got $1 million worth of damage and you need money to outlay and to hold you over to bridge the gap until you get the grant reimbursement or until you get a loan or whatever. You know, they always tell you personally, you know, to have X amount in the bank, whether it be a sickness, a loss of a job, or whatever. Same concept. So we have a capital projects fund, but in order to use it, you got to go to town meeting or call a special town meeting in order to gain approval to use it. Okay? You have got a bridge fund, doesn't have much in it, it's got like $50-something thousand. Something happens, I believe that this is a restricted fund. You would need to go to the voters and get permission to use it. What we're talking about here is you have essentially a positive fund balance, what they call it in governmental accounting. In essence, a surplus, okay? That is voter money, okay, or resident money. That is what the voters have paid in taxes for use, and now we have extra. So you can do really two or three things with that. You can give it back to the voters to use for next year's budget. You can reallocate it with voter approval. You need that voter approval. Or you can reallocate it, as I'm proposing, or at least a portion of this, for essentially that occasion of which something happens and you need to access money because whether it's the revenue side or the expense side is unexpected. And in your packets, I put a fair amount of material from VLCT, from the Government Finance Officers Association. In particular, there's a fair amount of info in there, and I think that one might be from GASB or just GOFOA. Essentially, they recommend between 5 and 20%, or in particular, 2 months worth of expenses. Asked Martin late last week, we spend about $175,000 a month, which is about 350 grand. So that equals to be about 10% of the budget. So you need to act on this in some way. And what I'm saying to you is that to save yourself from a future day where you would have to go back to the taxpayer and ask for more money, to essentially set up a reserve fund, in which case you allocate the money, the voters approve that. Select Board has the ability to withdraw from that reserve fund, provided that it is for the use that it was intended. So if Hurricane Irene rolls in and does $300,000 worth of damage, and you need to send the crew out there, you need to send engineers out there, or whatever you need to do, then this fund is available to take money from and utilize for that purpose. If you dip too low, needs to be some sort of a game plan to kind of put money back into that, you know, to kind of build it back up so that you've got it for future use. What I hinted at last meeting is that you have got a couple other needs hanging around out there. So let me go back a second. If you give it back to the voters, and there's really nothing wrong with that concept, it's kind of in line with, you know, what we're talking about here. Again, think about what I've been preaching to you since I arrived. Okay, so if you give money back, you will keep the tax rate. Let's just say you give back as much as we're gonna raise taxes in. So we're gonna raise $100,000 in the general fund this year. So we give back $100,000 and keep that tax rate low. Let's just say that's 5% of your budget. Well, that's really kind of cool, because if it's just the general fund that we're talking about, your tax rate stays as is, and you don't see a tax rate for this year. However, at some point, you need to get back up to whatever expense you're at. You need to raise the money to get there. So if you raise it 5% this year and you use money to offset that, and you raise your budget another 5% the year after, and your revenue is down here, well, you now need to raise that 10% to get back up there. Again, it gives them a nice refresher this year, but eventually you gotta jump back up there. So the concept here is that you don't want to kind of send people over speed bumps or potholes. You want to keep things consistent and, you know, somewhat, balanced year in and year out. So what you're essentially doing is reallocating this money to a need that you could foreseeably, need, whether it be this spring or 3 years from now, that is going to cost you money, or it's going to pull you into that pothole and it's going to hurt. So you're taking that money and you're allocating it to what you perceive to be, something that is going to be a benefit. And again, it is to keep that tax rate kind of smooth and not, okay, it's here, and then it's up here, and then it's back down here, and you know, you go from here to here, and then you need to raise a bunch for a year and then back down. We want to keep it kind of smooth and consistent. So the three things that I'm talking about here at the moment is primarily the fund balance reserve. So you put in, I'm talking $300,000 at a minimum. You have 450,000, 300,000, which is not quite the 2 months, but close to about 10%. And then you reallocate the other 150,000, again with voter approval, 50,000 to the bridge fund, which brings you up to 100,000. 100,000 to your box culvert fund. And then you've got 80,000 already for a highway fund, which is for kind of general highway uses. You could probably pull from that into either one of those funds if necessary. And just to give you an indication, even if you plan your problems, so let's just say we don't have ARPA and we're going to do Jennyville Road, and we get a grant, we're still on the hook for 20%. So on any given year, on a structures grant for a box culvert, which costs you about $200,000, if it's a good year and the local match is 10%, you're going to need 20 grand no matter what that you would have to budget for in order to raise. If it's 20%, you are going to need 40 grand that you're going to need to come up with just to do the box culvert. The state may help you with the rest. If you just wake up and let's just say it wasn't a storm, so there's no FEMA to help you, but Jennyville goes anyways. You know, let's just say it's a rainstorm and it's not a presidential declaration. It's not a big enough storm event for FEMA to kick in. Well, you're on the hook for a whole lot of money, and you're either going to do one of two things. You have to go back to the taxpayer to raise that money, or you've got a reserve fund set up for some of that stuff, which is box culverts, and or you've got your fund balance reserve fund. So these are things, the box culvert reserve fund is something that the board talked about establishing. We haven't established yet because it would raise the tax rate too high last year and even this year in order to start contributing to it. But we do have excess monies here that you can contribute to these reserve funds, set yourself up for those particular issues, and set yourself up for what's essentially called a rainy day fund, and is highly recommended by Government Finance Officers Association to have between a 5 and 20% of both your general fund and highway fund expenditures. So that's how we get to 300,000 to 300,000, 350,000 in a hurry. I also like the idea of putting 350,000 into this fund and putting 50,000 into the bridge fund and 50,000 into the culvert fund. Just a slower start on the culvert fund, but you're kind of in a pretty decent position with your fund balance. Very smart way to go. Set yourself up for, you know, unexpected incidents. And again, it would need voter approval. Each of these movements would need that. And, you know, basically a recommendation that I certainly stand behind. And when I was in Norwich, they had this very, very well. And then between FEMA and a new select board, most of that kind of evaporated. And last year they looked at trying to claw some of that back. And the amount of money it was going to cost them to try and, you know, bring that fund balance back was pretty high. I don't think they got to where they needed to go. So it's good to have in place. It's smart financial, you know, smart financial thought process, beneficial to the taxpayer, particularly in the long run, to take this and put it into something that I can foresee as being almost an immediate need. You know, even if you get grant money, there's generally a local match to that. Even with FEMA money, you end up with a 12.5% match.
So where would that money come from?
So you have general fund money. So it's essentially a surplus.
We
Fund
have
balance.
450,000?
450,000
Okay,
general fund surplus.
okay.
Right now?
Yep. At the end of, as of June 30th, 2021, you have that. That's basically using audited numbers at this point. So,
Isn't that unusual to have such a?
it is for us, because we went from having a $250,000 deficit to kind of turning the tables on that. And I won't get too into the weeds, but the whole loan between the capital projects fund and the general fund kind of factored into this. But, you know, at one point it was over $200,000 deficit. We've just put things into place. Couple things we budgeted for that we didn't need ultimately, you know, with the Fork Brook Road property, we budgeted like $25,000 cleanup. We didn't have to clean that up. You know, we had like $15,000 left over from, you know, that we didn't utilize for legal fees the year that we did a reappraisal. Certain things that, you know, we budgeted for, we now have it. But, you know, it is going to put into place pieces that certainly will be beneficial, if not for us, for those that come after us. They will be very appreciative that we have had the foresight to do this.
So what are you asking for tonight?
So I'm bringing this up. It will become, you probably, as we reach or move towards January and I start to put these articles together. So we're going to have an article for John's forestry truck. We're going to have an article for the climate resolution. So we're starting to see more articles this year, I think, than we've ever seen in the last 15, 20 years. This would probably be 3 separate articles, if not maybe 2. You know, one for the movement of money to a bridge and a culvert fund, and then one specifically for, you know, putting your fund balance money into a reserve fund, specifically for the purposes of what, you know, a rainy day fund. You know, you really, you know, because of state statute in Vermont, the government finance officers basically recommend that you just keep this as free, you know, unassigned fund balance, basically just an unassigned surplus. In Vermont, you kind of need to deal with your surplus. You kind of need to, you know, decide what you're going to do with it, because it's taxpayer money. You're going to give it back. Are you going to, you know, you're going to put it into a reserve fund. You need to ask their, you know, get their approval to do such. So what VLCT seems to, basically what everybody has come up with is, you know, if you establish a reserve fund, the voters approve to do that, that fund balance or that positive unassigned fund balance moves into this reserve fund. But the wording is such that it acts much like a positive fund balance. It's there, you add to it, you know, as you get surpluses in future years, and if something pops up, you would draw for it for whatever reason it pops up. If you end up taking it all out, well then, you know, you have to work, you know, go through all this work to kind of put it back into it and replenish it.
If I read that right, I think they're still recommending that you have a positive fund balance also, because if you do have an emergency and you have to use your reserve fund,
yep,
then you have to be in a position to replenish it.
So this ends up being your fund balance. So this ends up being, so you then, if you take it all out, or even if you use, I think they use 75% of the, if it lowers to a threshold
That's
determined.
right, certain threshold, yeah.
Determined by the select board, then you need to, come up with an idea as to how you're gonna replenish it. So, you don't just, take it all out and to do whatever something that you wanna do with it, and then you just say, okay, we'll just, thanks Phil, Gordon, Mary, and Martha for doing that, but we just, you saved our day. This is 8 years from now, and they use it and they don't replenish it. They certainly haven't done the next select board after that.
Neglected to say Curtis.
Any justice? You said, you're in a different time zone, man. You gotta give me like 2 hours to get to you.
Dave, I have a couple of questions. You were talking about 3 potential different funds. A general one, and then a bridge, and then a box culvert. If we created the bridge and the box culvert, we would be in a position, I would think, every year to want to contribute more to those reserve funds? Whereas the general one that we would create now, would we be growing that every year, or would we just know that it's there until we need it?
So there's between 5 and 20%. I don't think you need to save more than 20%. I wouldn't personally go below 10%. VLCT says 5%. So you could grow that. You can do that a couple different ways. You can decide to contribute to it every year and put money into it to grow it. Or you could say, which is the second option is a much slower option, is that when you have surpluses, the surpluses will go into this fund and you can kind of grow it as you have a surplus. And then if you have a deficit in any one given year, it's going to kind of come out of that reserve fund to cover the deficit. And in that way, it acts a lot like what Gordon's saying, is at that point, it works much like a fund balance. But by actually taking this and putting it into a reserve fund, you're getting the voter approval to do and have this money act exactly the way we're talking about.
Okay. And then could we create language that the town would feel comfortable with, we would feel comfortable with, that we could use it without going back for a vote? A hypothetical, should the Emerald Ash Borer hit Hartland 5 years from now pretty badly, could we possibly use the funds to cut trees? Or do we have to sort of create, when we create this fund, do we have to describe with specific language, this is how we would imagine using it?
So if you had a storm and it blew over 200 trees and you had to go out and saw 200 trees and it was going to cost you 200 grand, then this money in this fund would be available to the select board. If you just wanted to methodically go out and cut 200 trees, but you had time to plan for it and to cut it and to do it and to budget for it, then that's what you need to do.
Okay.
This is for an unexpected, you wake up, a tornado blew through and, blows down all your Emerald Ash Borer trees, and you end up with, a road full of trees that you gotta go clear, and it's gonna cost you money. It's for that unexpected hit. If you've got time to plan for it and to, deal with it, then that's what you should do. It's not a reserve fund to just say, okay, we're gonna go out over the next 5 years and cut ash trees. It's for a distinct loss of revenue or an unexpected expense.
Okay. So I certainly get the healthy economic approach of having the rainy day fund. You know, there's no, I'm sure we all think about that, you know, in our own budgets. So I'm still waiting to see what the slippery slope is. Where, you know, what's the gotcha? Yeah.
There is no gotcha. I think that this is an extremely responsible step for a select board to take. I think that, you know, it's tough to address it because in any given year, you know, and we're still not through this year, you know, we could end up over budget and, you know, you end up, you know, being in the hole 75 grand. So
Well,
it's
we
not.
just talk about inflation all evening.
Yeah, it's not, you know, it's not a surplus of 450, it's all of a sudden a surplus of, you know, 375, 350, and it's like, okay, you know, our plans are kind of shot. So it's kind of tough, but I think at this point, with the general fund, then, you know, we need to address it, and I think taking some money and putting it into those, the bridge and the culverts is going to say, you know, we're gonna have to add to that, you know,
normal budgeting.
One a little bit more, but certainly if we wake up and we need to deal with it, or we need to put a culvert in a year and a half from now, but let's just say we get some state assistance, we're still gonna need like 40 grand to, you know, help us with that. You know, we had to budget, you know, FEMA is a smaller local share. You know, 2 years ago, we had to budget the 16,500 for Mace Hill, you know, the local share. That wasn't even the full amount. We relied a little bit on the surplus monies in that fund to kind of deal with it, so.
Okay. Thank you. So Mary, you asked before, but I wasn't sure what, I know what this, so tonight was just a discussion?
That's what I'm asking Dave, yeah.
So tonight is just a discussion. So this is, you know, I'm letting you warm up to this idea, get comfortable with it. We'll talk more about this either next week or on the 3rd, when it becomes, yes, this is what we want to do, so that I can then put an article together to put on the ballot.
Well, I certainly thought that the documentation that you sent was helpful in knowing that this is fully supported by these accounting groups, agencies, whatever, and that, I mean, to me, it seems, yes, we should definitely do this. And
we have had a surplus in our budget most of the time over the last 30 years that I've been running at this, but no official policy.
So what usually in the past, what has happened to this?
I remember when the Hiram bought a grader one time.
So this formalizes the process.
Yes, I think it's a good idea.
This puts it into, you know, hey, look, we've got money, but, you know, Dave's not gonna go out and buy a grader with it. You know, however, if the grader, you know, 3 wheels fall off and then the middle body just goes kaput and we're in the middle of spring and we gotta go run out and get one, this may get us, help bridge the gap.
Be careful there, because I remember, wasn't it last summer or the summer before last, I was coming down Advent Hill and I saw the town tractor with only 3 wheels. There was nothing in it. The wheel was kind of down the road a piece.
oh my God.
So let me just finish this. Yes, go ahead.
I just.
Wait a minute, who's this? We have another select board member somewhere. Where is it?
I just have a procedural question because in your documentation you sent to us, it looks like we would need to pass a new policy for this. So would we have to follow the normal policy process 60 days, public meeting, all of that good stuff, or is it special in some way?
So I think, Curtis, I'd have to look, and you've mentioned this before. If I recall, the 60-day period thing is for an ordinance, which is a little bit different from the policy. So I believe that the select board can, I think the select board can set up the policy. However, you can't set the policy up to put the money into the reserve unless you have voter approval. You can put the policy together to let the voters know what it's going to look like so that they can vote on something to this effect. But it's not something that we could sign and implement until the voters say, yes, you can take that money and establish a reserve fund to do this. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
The other thing I've left out of this is we're also lucky enough to have a highway surplus. Now, the monies are different in a highway fund, and you don't need to act on it like you do a general fund. The highway fund can be used directly for highway operations. So again, I'm going to come back to, I know, Gordon, you mentioned the ARPA funding, but as the meeting progressed, I remembered that ARPA funding, that the infrastructure uses of ARPA funding money is pretty limited. So I wouldn't hang my hat on, maybe you can make a creative argument, but I wouldn't hang my hat on it. I'm going to come back to the extensive amount of paving that we've got to do. And again, I'm kind of, eyeing, we got these different assets, the culverts, the bridges. One of them that we particularly are way behind in and need to do things immediately is on the paving. But what I'm saying is, hey, we've also got this project hanging out there that could potentially go over. Our uses or our resources are pretty limited as to where you would go if we go over. This money can be used. I would just be eyeing, the paving, but, it'll be in the town manager update, but it is being reviewed by the state of Vermont at the moment for the 1111 permit, which is very good for us. So we're progressing on this. We don't have definitive pricing. I did see a new estimate, which is higher than what we've had in the past, but I haven't quite taken the time to figure it out. I would just hold that close to your chest before we go out and say, okay, we're gonna increase our paving for next year by 6 roads. I think we need to do that. I would just say, hey, let's check this box first before we move on and take care of some of this other stuff.
So what's the surplus in the highway fund?
Also about 450. And that one, there's no question, can go quick. I mean, just on, and again, it's different because there's state money involved in the highway. But it's not all taxpayer money. There's state money, so that the use of this is different. Whereas the general fund, you need to kind of act on. Highway fund, I would still leave, Gordon, what you're talking about, a little bit of that buffer, just, because, but we need to, if, for instance, the Three Corners intersection project goes perfectly, we need to no doubt accelerate our paving, just across the board, Clay Hill Road, Queechee Road, almost every road in North Hartland, just as, we need to just accelerate that. And this would help us to gain some ground on doing that.
Dave, is it okay for the highway fund to have that surplus without having a policy to
It is.
regulate it?
Yep. The needs aren't as great to address it in the highway fund compared to the general fund where it's complete taxpayer dollars. Different situation that needs to be addressed.
I thought this sample they gave us of the Guilford town of Guilford was really simple and to the point.
I agree. So last point, our auditor sent us that, and you'll notice that there was no mean language in our audit about, hey,
Yeah.
what are you doing with this? Because in talking with them, they are also of the opinion that, hey, at some point, having a rainy day fund is in your best interest. So you didn't hear anything about, hey, what are you doing with that money? They left it alone, but it's something that we should be transparent, let them know what we're gonna do with it, let them know that, you know, we plan on this going to a good cause and that we hope to, you know, keep things stabilized for you as we move along here and also grow our budget to cover our other needs.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's some question about like, well, what do you mean by stabilized? Is a 5% yearly increase stabilization? Is no net increase stabilization? Like, I imagine many people will have different definitions of the word stabilization in the tax rate.
Absolutely. So whether it's 5%, Curtis, 3%, or 8% yearly, or even 5, you know, to 8 to, you know, 5 to 4, you know, keeping it somewhat consistent and, you know, so you kind of get a feel for year in, year out what you're going to need to, you know, budget for. When I say, when I mention those words, you know, you could go from, you know, keeping the tax rate steady to 12%, back down to 3%, up to 8%, back down to 1%. You want to keep it somewhat consistent, Curtis, in that, and I'll just leave it with consistent and not kind of yank people every which direction.
Did you say?
I hate to prolong this because it's getting late, but why do we need a culvert fund, a bridge fund, and another fund? Wouldn't it be simpler just to have one big fund? Because what if you suddenly need a lot of bridges, then your bridge fund is empty and...
Martha, I think the answer to that is particularly for the box culvert fund. They're so expensive, and we're not going to be able to put them in if we don't have something to fall back on. Isn't that right, Dave? They're needed. I mean, there's so many places that they're really needed in town, and
I understand
we're
that,
just
but
ignoring them.
why is it, if there's just one big fund, why can't we use it for culverts?
Well, because this would designate that use, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's, you know, I don't know, Martin, if you have a comment. It's almost 6 of one, half dozen the other. You know, you could lump it together. You know, we've already got a bridge fund and a highway fund. You know, you can maybe lump the culverts in with a highway fund. But even that gets complicated because this has to go to the voters. And bear with me on this. This is only something an accountant would love. But the highway fund.
Yeah, never mind.
The highway fund was started by the Selectboard. It wasn't started by the voters. It was started by the Selectboard. So Phil had a question for me today. So that is an allocated. That has a classification, allocated. So let's just say we want to now put money into this fund that was designated by the by the voters. That has a more stringent classification, and it is essentially restricted funds. And we actually have to account for that almost like it's 2 separate funds. So take your pick. Either way, it's going to get complicated. I would just. I think my answer.
I'll defer to your...
I think
Please make it stop.
I think my answer is that if you have the bridge fund and you have a culvert fund, we have a highway fund that seems to go either way. So if it's not enough in the culvert fund, you can pull from the highway fund and vice versa.
Okay.
I don't have all the answers for you tonight. Martin and I will mull this over a little bit more. It's the concept I really wanted.
Wait a minute, you can't take money from the bridge fund for the highway department?
No,
No.
but I believe that you could probably take money from the highway fund. So if your bridge goes out
Yeah,
and $100,000 isn't enough, you need an additional 50,000, I think you could probably, with a
Yeah.
straight face, take it from the highway fund.
yeah, okay.
But you can't go the other way.
Okay.
So I'm looking at another one of my comments from that comprehensive action plan. Dave's recommendations are going to be accountable and restorative so that we can actually not get in trouble going forward. I loved reading that report. I got all these phrases. I have no idea what that means.
So, Dave, now it's time for a speed report. Your manager's update. We're gonna see how fast you can get through this.
It's pretty quick.
Is it?
Well, it
Okay.
depends on you on this one.
Okay. Oh,
Mill Street Bridge, they are starting tomorrow, maybe done early next week.
oh, that's great news.
That is very good news.
Yeah, wow.
Three Corners intersection, as I mentioned, is now in front of the state. We submitted a final set of plans, but we have now submitted basically bid documents, which is as final as it can really get. So that is moving along. Last one is general conversation, select board meetings. And as COVID starts to increase, and we're in the holiday season, there's some thought that maybe Zoom meetings completely versus we would still need to have I would still need to sit here and be a physical presence for anybody that comes in. But it may be time to at least start thinking about, select board and public participation via Zoom instead of trying to meet in person. And to kind of dovetail in with that, in speaking with Sarah Raitt, that's the way we're going with that, trying to push that, select board meeting, the public, participation meeting on ARPA. Tonight we had a pretty good crowd, but even tonight we're maxing out a little bit as far as the number of people in here. Just kind of like the fund balance, we don't need a final answer tonight. And at the moment, I'm not saying, look, this is where we gotta go, but we may want to keep this in our minds as we move past Christmas.
Dave, would it be a possibility to have not just you here, but the rest of the board, but not the public, and maybe we could limit the.
We can't.
Can you do that?
I bet we can.
We can't limit public participation.
Well, no, but they would Zoom it. I'm saying they would be on Zoom, but we would be here. No, I'm not trying to limit it.
I still think, for instance, tonight, the group of four with the climate resolution particularly wanted to be right in front of you.
They wouldn't have to be though.
We can't say no.
Can't say no. What about these two guys that are doing that? Do we need two? Do you have to be two?
Usually we go in pairs of two.
Do you have to be two is my question.
I'm not quite sure. I'm the director.
Yeah.
Why, what's that make a difference?
Well, it's one more person that might have COVID, that's all.
Oh.
I mean, they're trying to limit the numbers.
Well, I mean, if you're doing Zoom completely and you all have a laptop, we might not even need to be here, either of us, if your intention is to do full Zoom. But I think if one of us is going to be here, usually we go out and cruise, but I can't say that for sure.
I think the big difference, Dave, between right now and a year ago is that everybody's vaccinated.
Yeah, but the numbers are worse
I
now.
know they are.
Huh?
I know they are.
And not everybody's
People aren't-
vaccinated, that's why the
people aren't.
numbers are so bad.
But the
But it's
people,
mostly unvaccinated,
it's always, it's said, the fact, the number is that you're 14 times more apt to have COVID if you haven't been vaccinated than if you had. I think was that it?
That sounds about right.
Something like that.
So you're saying we might as well meet in person because we've all been vaccinated?
Yeah, they're not gonna come here if you're feeling sick, obviously. I mean, that's,
You went on Zoom a couple weeks ago, Mary, because you weren't feeling well.
No, she said
No,
at
I
the
was
end of
down
the
here.
paper. I did that last week.
Oh, yeah.
It was terrible. I couldn't hear anything. I would never want to do it again.
yeah,
The meeting upstairs, I watched some of it and it was horrible.
Yeah, you can't, that's why we moved down.
It's so
You just,
garbled.
we had to make the choice that we either try and, you know, the projecting it just wasn't gonna.
I mean, last week you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Whenever the last meeting,
A
yes,
week
last
ago.
week, yes.
A week
yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the interest of listening to what Martha said a while ago. Good suggestion, we'll have to think about it. And let's go.
Hey, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Phil?
Is there anything else, Dave? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
One second.
Good night, Curtis.
8:42. Good night, Curtis. Thank you.
Good morning, Curtis.
Oh, yeah, good morning.